Hello, this is CRP speaking to you live on today, Sunday, September 5th, 2021. I cannot believe that 2/3 of the year has already flown by. But here we are, beginning of September, beginning of the fall, beginning of the long winter. Oh, yeah. I have to say that I think that this winter is going to be goddamn interesting. And I think that the spring next year and the summer of next year are going to be even more so, unfortunately, because you know that old Chinese curse, may you live in interesting times. Yeah, I think that we're going to be living in exceedingly interesting times for the foreseeable future. And so, let me get cracking with this particular analysis of some things that have been popping into my head. So before anything, of course, can you please give me a +1 to ensure that you guys can see and hear me properly? I'm assuming that everything's copacetic, but I just want to ensure that you are all watching me and hearing me. And yeah. So while I wait for chat to catch up, okay, great. Chat has caught up and everything is A-okay. Okay, so I'm just going to close out my camera for the time being and just show you the PowerPoint presentation. And of course, as usual, I'll do the PowerPoint presentation for about 90 minutes or so. And then I'll be taking questions and comments. I hope that it can be about this, but of course, I'm happy to take questions and comments about anything. But if you can, I'd appreciate you trying to stick to topic. And yeah, and by the way, just a quick announcement. You know, what I'm probably going to be doing is last June, it should have been around June 20th, the change of seasons. I did my last AMA. So I'm probably going to do that every change of season. You know, the change of season is usually around the 21st every 3 months, you know, the 21st of September, the 21st of December, the 21st of March, then 21st of June. And so I'm probably going to do another AMA later this month in September. I think that that would be like a nice change of pace, and I'm just announcing it ahead of time. Another thing that I'm going to be doing into the future is I'm going to be looking at heroes, men and some women that we've been taught to believe are our heroes. And I'm going to analyze them from a different perspective because I don't think that many of these people are particularly heroic. And some I think are rather villainous, to tell you the truth. And I'm going to be starting with Winston Churchill. And I'm probably going to be doing that broadcast on Winston Churchill probably next Sunday. Fingers crossed. It'll depend if I'm able to read all the material that I'd like to read. And if not, then it'll just be postponed, but it's definitely going to happen. Because Winston Churchill is somebody whom I've always been very, frankly, very negative about. I think that he's an asshole. I think that he was a fucking idiot. I think that he threw away the British Empire because of his own ego. And I think that he has been lionized for reasons that have nothing to do with his actual achievements. If you look at his actual achievements, you realize what a sick and despicable guy he really was. And so, yeah, I'm going to talk about that. I mean, sick, despicable, incompetent, a warmonger, a crazy man, all those things. And I'm going to talk about that. So, yeah, you know, because I think it's good. The deconstructionists always are like, you have to reevaluate history and shit like that. Okay, motherfucker, let's reevaluate history. Let's start with Winston Churchill, sainted Winston Churchill. Okay, so yeah, I just want to get those announcements out of the way. And yeah, let's get cracking. Okay, a possible great filter. Okay, so let me explain to you what this term is. It sounds science fiction-y, but it's not. It's goddamn interesting if you think about it. Okay, so the obvious question that a lot of people have is, how come there aren't any aliens? Huh? Where do the aliens go? Huh? We look out in the night sky and, you know, we don't see any flying saucers or anything like that. You know, with our big telescopes and all the rest of it, we don't see any evidence of technologically advanced civilizations. And that is a little bit nerve-wracking. I mean, yeah, sure, there are all these UFOs, blah, blah, blah. But I mean, come on. Okay, let's get real. Okay, like Jack Nicholson said in As Good as It Gets, think white and get serious. fuck the UFOs. We gotta see something like observable that we know for a fact comes from an intelligent civilization. We haven't seen anything of the sort. No clue whatsoever about aliens. And now we come to Drake's equation. Drake's equation is from the astrophysicist Frank Drake, I believe his first name is. He and Carl Sagan came up with the notion that, well, if there are, X number of stars in the galaxy, in the universe, rather, and of those stars, a certain fraction of them is going to have planets, and a certain fraction of those planets are going to be habitable, and a fraction of those are going to be, the possibility of life. And you keep on adding these filters. Eventually, you'll get down to a number of planets where intelligent life can emerge. And Drake and Sagan basically came up with millions, because they started with very conservative numbers, and the fractions were always incredibly low, like 1 in 1,000. There are X number of, billions, if not trillions of stars in the galaxy, and 1 in 1,000 has habitable planets, and 1 in 1,000 of those has the possibility of life, and 1 in 1,000 of those got intelligent life, and 1 in 1,000 of those got intelligent life that could travel in space, and that came to like 1 million or something. A very, very large number. And so that's Drake's equation. But the Fermi paradox is, of course, the flip side of that. We don't see any of these guys. We don't see any of them. Where do they go? Where are all these intelligent life forms? And so there are all kinds of explanations that prima facie seem very reasonable. Like, for instance, there could have been intelligent life in some star or other, but it happened, 2-3 billion years ago. And because of circumstances, maybe the star blew up, who knows what, that civilization is gone and forgotten. And here we are, 2 billion years after that previous civilization, and we don't see any remains of it, because the artifacts of that civilization would have been destroyed over the centuries, the millennia, the eons, right? 1 billion years is quite a bit of time, right? The Earth alone is only 4 billion years old, and life on Earth is barely 1 billion years old. Okay, just unicellular life. Okay. So it's, there's the Fermi paradox that sort of like tries to explain why we aren't seeing any aliens, right? Now, a further refinement of Fermi's paradox is the notion of great filters. And this is where the rubber meets the road insofar as this presentation, and something that you can really chew on. Okay? Now, the great filters is the notion that Drake's equation is not wrong in principle, but rather the fractions are much, much greater. Okay? All right, let me phrase that. The denominator of these fractions is much, much greater. It's not 1 in 1,000, it's 1 in 1 million, because of these great filters. And the people who have been thinking about these have identified so far 9. And let me go through them. And there are some slight variations, and we'll get to them. The first great filter is the notion that lots of star systems have planets, because when Drake's equation was first formulated, there was no evidence that there were other planets circling any other star. But astronomy has improved to the point where we have been able to deduce that there are planets circling around other stars. It's because our technology, especially the Hubble telescope, is able to very accurately measure the luminosity of faraway stars. And slight changes in that luminosity indicate that there may be a planet is passing in front of it. I personally don't understand the science of it, how exactly that would be. A planet is tiny, and it could be just a sunspot or something like that. But these people seem to know what they're talking about, and that's what they postulate. Nobody seems to be arguing with them, so I'll take them at their word. There are lots of planets around various stars, according to current theory. But the first great filter is that it's not an issue that there are a lot of planets around stars. It's rather the right kind of planet. A planet that has a liquid ocean, a liquid medium by which life could develop. Now, a lot of people say that it has to be liquid water. But that's not obviously true. It could be liquid ammonia. Why? Well, because water is a solvent, so is ammonia. See, so it's not an issue of it being water. It's an issue of it being a solvent. And there are lots of different kinds of solvents. Methane in liquefied form is also a solvent. And methane is a gas in our current atmosphere. Okay, and so you'd have a much cooler planet. And so I've always thought that this notion that a right solar system has to have water, and therefore there's only a Goldilocks band. I've always found that a little bit iffy because, of course, you could have a planet that has liquid methane or liquid ammonia, and life could develop there. So, but okay, let's just continue on. But I just want to point out that each of these filters have reasonable holes that you could poke into them. The first is the Goldilocks notion that a planet has to have water and be at the Goldilocks distance from the star. That is, not too close and not too far. If it's too close, the water vaporizes. If it's too far, the water freezes. It has to be in liquid form in that 0 to 100 degree temperature zone. Okay, fair enough. That's the first a great filter. But Brownlee and Ward have an extremely interesting book and theory called the rare earth hypothesis, which I read years ago. I bought it like in 97 or something like that. And I found it fascinating, and it seems very, very true and obvious. And I'm unclear as to why so many people sort of like shit on it. And the notion is very simple. See, Brownlee and Ward claim that it's not an issue that there aren't any planets. There are lots of planets, but they're not planets like the Earth that have a certain set of circumstances that make it unique. And they enumerate those circumstances. Those circumstances being, for instance, that the Earth circles a very, very stable star. And this is true. Our sun is one of the more stable stars in the galaxy. It has not had any kind of like burp or bump in the road. It has its normal cycles and whatnot, but it doesn't. It isn't. It is far more stable than most of the other stars in the galaxy. Not only that, the sun is perennially in a desert area of the galaxy because it's between the galactic arms. When you look out at nighttime, you see the Milky Way. What you're actually seeing is one of the forward galactic arms. And it's all that thickness of stars. The sun is between the arms. The sun is actually unique or almost unique in having such enormous distances between itself and the next star. The next star, Proxima Centauri, is 4.5 light years away. That's, apart from being incredibly far, that is incredibly rare. And so Brownlee and Ward go through all the arguments to show that the Earth is incredibly rare. It talks about the issue of the sun being, for all intents and purposes, in a desert inside the galaxy. It talks about how the sun is incredibly stable, how the Earth's orbit around the sun is incredibly stable, and also the rotation of its axis is such that the differences in seasonality are not so great. And so Brownlee and Ward go through all this stuff, and this is very interesting, and you should check it out. I mean, it adds quite a bit of thought to it, okay? So anyway, that's the first great filter, the right planet around the right star. That's basically the first filter. There aren't that many of those. Now, the second filter is that there are reproductive molecules on that planet. That is, molecules, chemical composites that can self-replicate, that can create themselves. Okay, I mean, let me phrase, not create themselves. That's self-replicate. I don't think I need to explain that. RNA is a typical example. It's a chemical that can replicate itself. Okay, then you have the next one, which is that there is simple single-cell life, prokaryotic life. Now, a simple single-cell life, according to this theory, is another barrier, another filter, and it's rare. Fair enough. The Earth existed, we believe, at this time, something like 3 billion years before a single-cell life arose. At least that's what current theory says, with the available evidence, which by definition, of course, is going to be incredibly scant. But that seems to be the prevailing notion. Now, complex single cell life, that took even more time. Okay. That was not something that was quite obvious, because you see, the complex single cell life, eukaryotic cells, right, are basically those cells that prehistorically what happened was that there were several different kinds of single cell life. And essentially, one kind ate another. And in eating that other, the one that got eaten became a symbiote with the one that ate it. And so they mutually aided one another. And that's how complex single cell life originated. Okay. And then from there, we have sexual reproduction. Here is something that I personally object to, because I am not clear as to why asexual reproduction, why it has to be sexual reproduction. Because you can have asexual reproduction and environmental development, Darwinian evolution. Sexual reproduction in and of itself is not really necessary for what you call it, for evolution. You can have, I mean, and there are asexual reproducing organisms that have developed and evolved quite naturally, just along with every other sexually reproducing species. Okay, so that filter, I've never quite understood it. Now, the next big filter, okay, the next reason that there isn't intelligent life, there aren't, aliens floating around us that we can see and examine, right, is the development of multicellular life. Because multicellular life, see, it's relatively easy to have single cell life. But for those single cells to become multicellular, that's a big jump, okay? And again, evidence is scant, but it seems that it took several 100 million years, perhaps as long as 1 billion years. Again, all of this stuff is conjectural, and you can argue until the cows come home as to when it was, and it doesn't really matter. Right? In a practical sense, who cares? But that is another filter, multicellular life. Now, from multicellular life, that is pretty obvious. I mean, once you have a double-celled organism, from going from a double or triple-celled organism to like an animal, like a dog or an orca or some shit like that, that's just inevitable. That's just evolution. You don't really have to worry about it. Okay, so long as you have a stable environment, or stable enough environment, there could be cataclysmic events like the the end of the dinosaurs, the asteroid, and all that shit. But so long as you have it stable enough, you'll eventually get to some large animal. The issue becomes arriving at an intelligent animal that can use tools. That one's a biggie, because we actually believe that there are at least two other organisms, perhaps three, that are almost as intelligent, if not more intelligent than we are, but can't use tools. And that would be octopuses, dolphins, and orcas. And there've been a lot of tests done and a lot of investigation, and it's believed that these three organisms are very close to us in brain power. At least studying them, it's enough to see that, yeah, their brain power and the organization of their brain is enough to be comparable to us. Octopuses, and by the way, it's not octopi, it's octopuses, because the word is not Latin origin, it's Greek. Octopuses, because of different factors, they are never going to develop the knowledge that we are, because they have the reproductive strategy. It's a K reproductive strategy as opposed to an R reproductive strategy. That is, the parents do not take care of the young; they just have as many as possible, and hope for the best, fate-wise, that one of them grows up to adulthood. Okay. But other than that, in terms of intelligence, a lot of studies seem to indicate that octopuses are as intelligent as human beings, or perhaps not as intelligent as human beings, but, at least a chimpanzee. Okay. But they can't use tools. Obviously, the octopus cannot. And obviously, dolphins and orcas cannot either, for the obvious reasons that they do not have the manual dexterity to do so. Okay. So, That's one filter, the intelligent animal who can use tools. And as you can see, so far, so good for human beings. Okay. Now, the eighth great filter is a civilization advancing towards interstellar colonization. Okay. That is, it's intelligent animals who can use tool, who have created a civilization that's marching forward towards interstellar colonization, i.e., flying saucers and jet rockets and whatever the fuck that will take them to other planets. Okay. Because, of course, if we're looking for aliens out there in the night sky, what are we looking for? We're looking for colonizers from a different planet. That's what we're looking for. I mean, that's what they are. Okay. Colonizers or explorers, it doesn't matter. As a practical matter, it's the same goddamn thing. And see, we are in the process of becoming that. We are in the process right now, us human beings are in the process of becoming the aliens in flying saucers. Okay. That's where we're at. Now, the ninth filter is interstellar colonization. And that means that a civilization has passed through this barrier and is colonizing other planets, other star systems, all the rest of it. Okay. They're in that process. Okay. And this is effectively species immortality. Once you cross that ninth barrier, you become immortal. Because, of course, if your home planet gets blown up because your home star becomes nova, well, you're going to have some other planets where you can live and you'll be fine. See? So, yeah. So we're at stage 8. We've crossed the barrier of creating a civilization that is advancing towards interstellar colonization. Okay? Now, to understand the notion of the great filter, people think that we have either passed the great filter or it's ahead of us. And according to this theory, the current standard theory of the great filter, we have yet to cross the ninth one, interstellar colonization. And it could be that interstellar colonization is just not possible. Okay? It's not that there aren't other intelligent tool making and tool using organisms elsewhere in the galaxy that have not created a civilization. There are plenty of those, but they just haven't figured out how to travel because the distances are so far that they just never figured out how to do it. See, that could be the final filter. Okay. That's what a lot of people think is ahead of us. And some people think that that filter cannot be broken through. Others believe it can be broken through. Okay. That's the current thinking is. I have a different theory. I have a different theory that we are, in fact, right now in the middle of a great filter. We are experiencing right now, and we don't realize it. Okay. And I'm going to explain it to you. I'm going to explain to you my industrial collapse theory, that we, right this second, are in the middle of it. And it's only going to be decades and centuries later that we'll be able to look back and realize the steps. But I think I've cracked this nut. Okay. And by the way, when I say that this is the industrial collapse theory, you think that industrial collapse is going to happen like over the next 5 years or 10 years. No. This is a process of centuries. This is like the collapse of the Roman Empire. Okay. These kinds of processes take centuries. They are irrevocable, but they don't happen overnight. Okay. I mean, that's the key issue you got to understand. And I think that the events that have happened over the past couple of years and the events that will be happening over the next few years are going to cement the fact that we're going on this industrial collapse. This, you can call it 8.5 great filter. Okay. Because we're never going to build the starships to go elsewhere. We're never even going to get close to that ability. Okay. Because of the filter that we are experiencing right now. Okay. Now, before I get into that, I want to do a brief divergence to something called my wave theory. Okay. This is something that I've always thought of in every process, every human process, and even natural processes. Okay. But certainly human processes, social processes. And it's a very simple theory and there's nothing to it, but I'm going to apply it later. And so it's important for you to familiarize yourself with it before I get going, so that you understand my argument when I get to it. Okay? Okay, so my thinking is that all developmental processes follow four stages. There is the period of growth and expansion, that is the wave swell. There's the period of consolidation, that is the wave crest. The wave cresting, that it's rising up and moving forward at great speed. Then there's the period of stagnation and decay. That's when the wave breaks, when the wave collapses and crashes. And then there's a period of crisis collapse, uh, basically the riptide, when it all pulls back. Okay, you can think of it as 2 steps forward and 1 step back. Okay, you can think of it as a sine wave, always going up and down, curving up and down. All processes, developmental processes of individuals and also of groups of people, be they families, tribes, nations, planets, they always follow these 4 stages. Okay, and it's not so much that they follow these 4 stages, rather, these 4 stages mentally are a great heuristic to understand everything that's going on. Because if you think about it, everything human, everything natural, it tends to repeat. You look at the spirals in a snail's shell. You look at the spirals of a galaxy. You look at the golden ratio, and they all fit. They all fit so goddamn perfectly, right? You look at fractals, right, and you can't tell if you're looking at what scale. It's impossible to tell. It could be anything. You see, and that's the thing. In nature, things repeat, patterns repeat at bigger or smaller scale. At the atomic scale, you have the atom's nucleus, and you have the electrons, and then you have stars with planets around it, and then you have galaxies with the center of the galaxy and all the stars spinning around it. Wheels within wheels. Okay, think of the wave theory in the same way. It's a great heuristic to understand processes, especially human processes. We grow and expand, we consolidate, we start to stagnate and decay, and then there's a sudden crisis and collapse. And it always follows the same pattern, and it always repeats. That's the comforting thought. That's why, shit happens, but then, the next day it's going to be better. And it is. Okay. I mean, shit happens, right? Everything goes up in flames. It's a total disaster. And the next day, well, you start to rebuild, and soon enough there's a growth and expansion, and then consolidation, and good times are here again. And then again, stagnation and decay and crash. And then crash brings growth and expansion again and again and again. Keep this up and keep this in mind. This is a cheerful thing. Okay. Okay. But, spoiler alert, we're not going to have a happy ending here. Okay. There won't be a repeat, and I'll explain why in this slide. Okay. This is my industrial collapse theory. Okay. Let me just check to make sure everything's hit me with a +1, please, just to make sure that everybody's following me along and that everything is copacetic. I'd appreciate it. Okay, this is my industrial collapse theory. You see, industrial social development stages. I mean, what happens when there's an industrial development? Well, human beings make tools. Why? In order to leverage human labor. See, that's the point of it. That's why we make tools. See, I mean, we can bring down a tree, just like a bunch of us, without any tools, just by our hands. We can figure out a way to break the branches and even break the trunk somehow, just by our bare hands. If we have enough people pulling on a tree, we could probably bring it down. Not easily, perhaps, but we can. But of course, if we have a little axe, just a little handle with a little, and it doesn't even have to be a metal blade. It can be a stone blade, right? We can chop down a tree pretty easily, and just one person can do it, right? Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, that's the whole point of tools. We are leveraging human labor with tools. We are making our human labor more efficient with tools. That's why we make tools. That's the point of them. And as tools become more complex, they require metals, inevitably. Because you can start with a stone axe, right? And you can sharpen the stone, right? But then after a while, it's just not easy. You have to replace the stone. It's a hassle. And so having a metal axe is better because it's harder to make a metal axe than a stone axe. But once you have that metal axe, mhm, you can sharpen the blade very easily, and it can be as good as new, lickety split, and you're chopping down trees left, right, and center, no problem. See, metal tools are superior to stone tools, and the obvious proof of that is that, see, how many stone tools do you happen to have in your kitchen drawer? Huh? I mean, if you have any, then well, you're obviously really behind the times. You should just go to Target or check out on Amazon to get all kinds of doodads that can give you all kinds of labor-saving devices and tools and whatnot. You see my point, see? But the thing is, see, these tools, they require fuels. You need fuels to create these tools. Fuels at first to forge the metal, because you need to get the metals hot enough that you can shape them to whatever it is that you want. And so you need fuels. And the first fuels, well, obviously wood. Wood's the most obvious one. So you use wood. But then wood doesn't heat hot enough for certain metals. You need other substances to create a fire hot enough that it can at least make the metal soft enough so that you can work on it, right? And this is not controversial. So you're going to need fuels. And as you build your tools and you use fuels, you're going to reach an industrial tipping point. Because with these tools, the more that you have these tools, the more efficient you work. The more efficient it is to make food, because you no longer have to gather food. You can plant it, and you can use a metal hoe to dig trenches so that you can plant your seed and you'll have more food. See, it's a very tough business, but see, farming, you can do it on your own or relatively few people, and you can feed a whole boatload of people with what you farm. See? And so industrial societies, they get at some unspecified tipping point. I'm not going to specify it here because it doesn't really matter. Okay. And we can argue that point. When is that tipping point? We can argue it endlessly, but it's non-controversial to say that such a tipping point exists. And once that industrial society reaches that tipping point, it creates the conditions for mass health by way of excess food, which leads to a population explosion, which leads to mass material prosperity. See, that's the key issue. See, the more industrial advances you make, the more you are able to grow your population, and it becomes a self-reinforcing cycle. See, the population that we have today of 7.7 billion or so, 7.8 billion or something, this population exists only because of the Industrial Revolution. Were it not for the Industrial Revolution, it would not exist. It would be fractions of that, maybe an eighth of the population today, under a billion, if not less. Okay. And if we start like really stripping away all the advantages of the Industrial Revolution, and of course the number of people would diminish accordingly, we'd probably wind up with just a couple 100 million people, if that. See? So you got to understand how important industrial societies are. See? They are a self-reinforcing cycle, and they grow. Okay. It's a virtuous cycle. Okay, since the start of the Industrial Revolution, which I'll just pause it at 1600. Again, it doesn't really matter when it was. We just have to agree that it happened in the past, in the not too distant past, right? Since the start of the Industrial Revolution, the sources of easily extractable metals have long been exhausted. And I don't think anybody has any disagreement with that. See, there was a time in the past when you could just walk by a stream and you'd find some bits of copper, bits of gold, bits of whatever metal you wanted, except, of course, steel, because it was just there, just lying around, see? And a lot of those places have been despoiled of those easily available metals. Of course, over the centuries, over the thousands of years that people have wanted tin, people have wanted this and that, copper and all the rest of it. Yeah, the easily extractable metals have been extracted. So at this point, at least 400 years after the start of the Industrial Revolution, none of those easily extractable metals are around. And the same goes for fossil fuels, which are the easiest fuel to use. See, Since the advent of the industrial internal combustion engine, which we could argue is the year 1900. The sources of easily extractable fossil fuels have been exhausted, and this is a truism. See, there were pools of oil in Texas back in the day, and those pools of oil are now dry because they pumped all that oil out and sold it and made money off of it almost centuries ago at this point, okay? And so you see my point. Easily extractable metals, easily extractable fuels are gone. To acquire new metals, to acquire new fuels, you need highly sophisticated industrial processes to reach them. For instance, in Brazil, a few years ago, they discovered this huge oil reserve, right? It's off the coast of Brazil. To get it, you're going to have like a whole bunch of oil platforms out in the ocean, out in the Atlantic, right? And to build those, apart from requiring capital, it requires extraordinary technology and knowledge. It's not an easy thing, okay? The oil is economically feasible. It can be gotten in terms of like costs per barrel. It's achievable economically. And at this time, technologically, it is achievable, but you need extremely sophisticated technology to reach that oil. And basically the same thing goes for metals. The metals are there. Copper, zinc, everything that you can imagine. There's plenty of reserves all over the earth, and they are very well known. And, we're not even talking about, like, say, Antarctica, which hasn't been explored. But see, all these locations, you need a lot of technology to be able to reach those places. If you were to find, say, the biggest copper mine on the planet in Antarctica, say, just hypothetically, you'd need all kinds of technology to get there. Fuck it, you'd need airplanes and all kinds of very sophisticated transportation devices to get to the spot where you could mine for this copper or whatever other metal. You see my point? Okay. So here comes the key argument, and I'm going to be expanding on in the next slide. If for whatever reason, the reason does not matter, there are going to be a whole bunch of them that I'll outline, but just take my word for it. For whatever reason, our current industrial society were to collapse, then human beings of the future will not have the technology to extract hard-to-reach metals and fuels. And there will be no easily accessible metals and fuels because they've been exhausted. Think about that. Suppose right now, around the world, we just collapse. We just fall apart right the fuck now, okay? And all of a sudden, everything just out the window. Our internet's gone. Everything's gone. It just doesn't fucking work. They're just empty, hollow buildings and nothing else, and we have to start from scratch. Say there's like some super fucking, solar event that just blows out every single computer on the face of the planet. That's actually possible, by the way, okay? And every single computer device is just blown out. Our civilization collapses. It's the big blackout. It takes a year for us to recover, right? But in that year, nothing much happens and, we collapsed, right? It's going to be really fucking hard to get those metals and those fuels that are in the ground. Really fucking hard. Yeah. Because the stuff that's easily available, that's all gone. It's been gone decades, if not centuries ago, okay? And people say, well, we can recycle metals. Yeah, but up to a point. Because recycling, and the dirty little secret about it, because I've worked in the alternative energy fields and I know a little bit about recycling, recycling is not economically efficient at all. It needs massive subsidies in order to happen, okay? Recycling is much harder than just digging up for new metals, okay? It is. Okay, it's just a fucking hassle. It's just a real fucking hassle. It's just easier to dig for more copper. Sure, like if you are a thief and you manage to break into some building and steal the copper tubing and the copper wiring, yeah, you can get good money for it, recycling that way. But that is technically recycling, right? It's theft, but also recycling. But see, the copper that you're getting, it's been refined. It's easy. That's easy. But when you have a lot of other goop with it, plastics and paint and oil and all the rest of it, then it becomes a fucking hassle. It does, okay? And so recycling is not going to be enough. you're going to have to figure out a way to get to those hard to reach metals, those hard to reach fuels. And if there's an industrial collapse, it's going to be no easy thing. So if future human beings cannot extract metals and fuels in the future, then there will never be an industrial revolution 2.0. Understand? See, and this is the punchline. Let me repeat the argument. If there is a collapse today, an industrial social collapse, the collapse of industrial society, rather, okay, for whatever reason, pandemic, war, whatever the fuck, the human beings in the future will not be able to extract hard to reach metals and hard to reach fuels, because to extract them, they need those metals and fuels and technology, okay? And since they can't reach those, if there is a collapse, and the collapse lasts, say, at least 50 years, after that, there will never be a industrial revolution 2.0, and we will never come back to the heights that we currently enjoy. This is the great filter, what we are living now. The fact that we have this industrial civilization that if it were to collapse, we would not be able to do it again. And by we, I mean human beings. If our civilization were to collapse like the Roman Empire, say, because the Roman Empire didn't collapse overnight. It took 400 years for it to collapse. But collapse it did. And by the end of it, it was nothing, right? And they had to start again from scratch. And eventually that led to the Italian Renaissance. And if you think about it in those terms, you know, you can argue that the Roman Empire collapsed, let's just arbitrarily say in the year 600. And the Italian Renaissance started, again, arbitrarily in the year 1300. So that was 700 years from one end to the other of just dark ages, of just fucking nothing, okay? 700 years. And you could argue that it was closer to 1,000 years. It doesn't really matter, okay? For purposes of this discussion, see, there was a collapse, and it lasted at least half a millennium. I mean, we can all agree on that at least, right? It lasted at least 500 years. You could argue 700 years. You can argue 1,000 years. You can even argue and push it and say it was like 1,200 years. It doesn't matter. Again, it does not matter. What matters is that it was at least, 20 generations, 500 years, okay? But then Italy and the rest of Europe restarted, regrew, Renaissance, rebirth, right? But see, they did not have an industrial civilization. And once Italy was reborn, and then the rest of Europe was reborn, and then the Dutch invented the notion of a corporation. And then soon after, you had the development in the UK, which was, of course, conquered by Holland, by the Dutch, by Netherlands. People always forget that, but it's true. 1688, they call it the Glorious Revolution. That's a total mindfuck. It was the Dutch invasion. The Dutch invaded England, conquered it, and soon after there was the Industrial Revolution. That Industrial Revolution has led to our civilization today. If this civilization that we are experiencing now were to collapse like the Roman Empire did, there would not be a Renaissance 500 or 1,000 years from now. There won't be. Because, see, the Industrial Revolution that started in, say, 1600, it started what? With grabbing up all those easily extractable, rather, metals and fuels. And in the future, those won't exist. The only fuels, the only metals that will exist will be so far in the ground that the technology in that future will not exist to be able to reach it. It will have been lost. And technologies get lost all the time, okay? This is not unusual, okay? Look up the Antikytherian clock. This was a device that was discovered off the coast of Greece, I believe, okay? The Antikytherian clockwork was this machine. It was encrusted and just rusted to hell, right? It was just like this block, but it had like the circle. And so they used very sophisticated imaging techniques and whatnot, and they figured out that inside it were all these gears. And once you assembled this in the same gears, it gave an accurate depiction of the solar system, of the phases of the moon, the phases of the different planets and whatnot. Incredible technology. And this device was invented around the time of Jesus Christ. And it was lost in a shipwreck, but it existed. Okay. And see, you see my point. This technology was lost for 2,000 years. And now we look at it and we're like, oh, that's so cool. They were so smart back then. Yeah. But we don't marvel at the fact that we were able to recover because of all those easily extractable metals and fuels. You got to understand that. That's the key. That's the key issue. See? And yeah, you're telling me, I'm seeing in chat somebody saying oil can be made from coal too. It is incredibly difficult. Forget about the capital expenditure. Okay? It's not the capital expenditure. It's the science and technology necessary to do that. After civilization has collapsed, it's not going to be an easy thing. It won't be possible. If our industrial civilization were to collapse, it would not be possible to do this because the technology would be lost. Why? Because the people who know how to do this are so few in number that the knowledge can easily be lost. That's the point. We have so specialized ourselves and so segregated the different aspects of our technology that if it were to collapse rather, there aren't enough people who would know how to do this and pass it on into the future. We would lose this information. And don't tell me that it would be like on some hard disk or some YouTube channel. That's stupid. Okay? It's incredibly stupid and incredibly wrong for a very simple reason. See, the digital technology that we currently have, current theory holds that none of it will exist in 100 years. All my videos and this chat and everything here, there will be no record of any of this. And they're actually kind of concerned because they're thinking to themselves, some people who have thought about this issue are thinking to themselves that historians in the future will have no idea about our current civilization because the technology that we have for records, for information, communications technology is so unbelievably fragile. I mean, shit, all I have to do is point to you to the fucking elections in the United States. And that technology is so fragile that they're having all kinds of trouble figuring out who actually fucking won. Okay. I mean, apart from the whole, the machinations going on there of people trying to fuck over other people and not let the truth come to light. But you see my point. Brian Eno, the musician, once was saying how he back in the 70s, he had made some music and he had put it on reel-to-reel tape. And then, several years later, but like in the 90s, right? He was looking through his tapes and he saw them and he's like, oh, let's listen to this. And he put them on a reel-to-reel player. He started listening to them. And he was listening to them and he listened to quite a bit of it. And actually, all of a sudden, by pure chance, he said that he noticed right in front of the reel-to-reel tape player, he noticed that there was this little pile of debris. And he stopped to figure, what the fuck is that shit? And he realized that, see, the tape that was passing through the reel-to-reel player, as it passed over the tape head, the plastic of the tape, the ferrous oxide on the tape was detaching. As he was playing these old tapes, he was losing the music that he'd written, and it was gone forever. He freaked the fuck out, and he quickly broke out a new microphone and new tape, and realized that he couldn't even take the reel off the reel-to-reel player. So he just left it on and started recording as best he could to get the best sound quality he could of these old tapes. And the old tapes were completely ruined. See? Because all of these media that we have today are very easy to degrade. You go to, say, Torino or Milan, they have records stretching back to the 12th century. Not kidding. Written records. But you see, the ink and the paper were of much more durable quality. They weren't thinking back in the day, oh, this is going to last, 800, 900 years. No, it's just an accident. They were just making paper as only they knew how. and this was the best that they could do, and so they did it, right? But we have become much more efficient. And so because of it, our mediums are much more fragile. We have a lot more information now, but all of this information that we have will disappear because the technology degrades. In fact, the US Census Bureau has like a whole bunch of information on tapes that were recorded during the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, computer tapes, right? And they don't know what the information is because there is no machine that exists today that can read it. Because all those machines over the decades were just junked. The tapes of the data remained, but the machines to read them were thrown away because they were like, passé. They weren't needed anymore. Better, more efficient, faster machines came in and replaced them, and they threw away the old machines. And so the old tapes with all that census data, nobody knows what's on it, and there's no way to read that data. And it's actually a problem. They've been trying to figure it out for quite a number of years. Some of that, they've been able to reconstruct it indirectly. Some of it, they've been able to actually find old machines in junkyards and shit and be able to get them going once again after heroic measures to repair these machines. But a lot of other of these tapes, nobody knows what's on them, and they're gone. You see the problem, see? This is not a trivial or inconsequential problem. It seems so. It seems so until you start to think about it. And once you start to think about it, then it becomes really fucking obvious. See? There are a lot of books, print books, that are going to vanish in the next few decades because the paper on which they were printed used a certain acid that's making the pages fade. Okay? And I forget the year. I used to know this shit real well because, of course, I was in publishing. And back in the 90s, I knew all this information. But if I recall correctly, I could be wrong, but all these books will be essentially blank by the year something like 2100 or 2150, which is historically nothing, okay? It's just less than 200 years away. It'll be gone. See, the Declaration of Independence, the original one, well, there are several original ones. And that's actually something that not that many people know, but there were actually several different ones. But the version that everybody knows, right? The one that's in the Library of Congress, okay? The one that's in under that bulletproof glass, right? And all the rest of it. See, those documents are from less than 300 years ago. And they're in great shape because the technology was less efficient. Efficiency leads to ease of degradation. That's a key insight, okay? So anyway, the argument is very simple. If there is an industrial collapse, and not an industrial collapse that takes, 2 years, no, something that takes longer, a longer stretched out decay and collapse of our industrial society, there will, of course, like the natural riptide, be a period of nothingness, and then it'll swell again. But when it swells again, the Industrial Revolution will not be able to take off. And this gets us to our third thing. Let me recap my wave theory. There's the growth expansion, which is the swell. There's the consolidation, which is the crest. Then there's stagnation and decay, which is the break, the wave breaking, right? And then there's the crisis collapse, which is the riptide, right? Okay, so let's look at the stages of the industrial wave theory. The industrial swell, you could argue, as I would, that it started really with the Bronze Age, back a couple of thousand years before Christ. And the Bronze Age led through the development of the assembly line. That was the long industrial swell. And why the assembly line? Because that's when industry really took off. That's when industry crested. From the point of the assembly line to the age of computers and the communications technology, which one could argue, as I would, is over. We have already peaked in our computational and in communications technology. Because the communications technology, the key issue was total communication. I actually developed that in something that I'm writing right now, and so I'll recap it really quickly. It's a very simple notion. See, the idea of total communication is that one person can broadcast himself live to everyone on the face of the planet simultaneously. And And any one person on Earth, any single individual person on Earth, can listen to any other person on Earth whenever they want to. That's the notion of total communication that exists right now. Of course, I mean, yes, of course, there's no such one person who has actually communicated to every human being on the face of the planet, but it's possible. Okay, it's just a possibility. It's not the actuality. I mean, and there have been instances where one person has communicated with a huge swath of the population. I mean, think of PewDiePie, for instance, or somebody like that. I mean, it's theoretical. It's in theory at this time possible, and that's all that matters. Okay, but see, our communications technology has crested. We've topped. We've reached the top, the peak. Okay, the industrial break started happening in the 1980s. And it was with the neoliberal notion of deindustrialization, so-called globalization. Okay. Now, why was this? Why is this the beginning of the decay, of the stagnation? Yeah, because you're removing industrial technology from the different advanced countries and shipping it to countries with cheaper labor. You're looking for an economic benefit, which is good, it's understandable. And you're arbitraging wage prices. See, in the United States and the United Kingdom, wages are high. In China or Vietnam or Guatemala, wages are low. So you take your looms, you take your apparel manufacturers, and you send them to China, you send them to Guatemala, you send them to Vietnam, and you remove the industry from the industrially advanced society. You deindustrialize it, which the globalists, the neoliberals, thought was a great thing, the post-industrial nation. Yeah, but you remove that industry, and there's no way to replace it. And so you have two problems that occur as far as I'm concerned. Number one is that you create an extremely fragile supply chain. See, because the whole notion of deindustrialization, of globalization, of removing industry from expensive markets and putting it over in cheap markets, cheap labor markets. The whole notion was to take advantage of comparative advantage. Comparative advantage is the notion that sometimes it is more worth your while to not do something that you are proficient at so that you can use your time and effort more productively at something else. A simple example is the following. Suppose I'm a lawyer. I'm a lawyer and I earn $500 an hour. And that's pretty good pay, right? And I earn $500 an hour consistently because I'm a high-flying lawyer. And I also happen to know quite a bit about plumbing, because back in the day, I don't know, my dad was a plumber. I learned all there was to know about plumbing, or I worked there as a plumber during my, summers in college or whatever the fuck, right? And I'm a really good plumber. And, my toilet is backed up. I'm a really good plumber. I could fix this. I could fix it in a half an hour, right? But see, I wouldn't do it. Why? Because see, even though I'm a really good plumber and I could do it in a half hour, I'm going to hire some other guy to fix my backed up toilet. And it's going to take him an hour. But you see, paying him an hour is going to cost me, say, $75. Whereas if I spend half an hour, I lose $250. Yeah, because my time as a lawyer is worth $500. Half an hour is half of $500. That's $250. The plumber, who's not so capable as me, not so smart as me, not so knowledgeable about plumbing as I am, is going to take twice as long. He's going to take a full hour to do it. But the full hour is going to cost, $100, which is less than $250. Ergo, I don't fix it myself. I hire a plumber to do it for me. That's comparative advantage. And that's the whole basis of globalization. You're taking you're using comparative advantage to arbitrage labor prices. Okay. But because of this, you create an extremely fragile supply chain. And I forgot to write it down here in the outline, but I'll tell you, you also lose knowledge. And this is key. Let me give you an example of a fragile supply chain. See, basic chips, the kind of chips that you use in cars and such, they're not particularly complicated. I mean, they're complicated, but they're not that fucking complicated. They're not that fucking hard to make. But over the decades, it was just economically advantageous to close out chip manufacturing companies in Europe and the United States and Canada and ship them to Taiwan, of all places. And Taiwan became like Taipei became this big center of these very basic chips that are used for everything from toasters to cars. They're sophisticated, but not that sophisticated. They're not top end. They're medium to low end chips. I mean, I'm not personally that clear on it, but that's not really important. The point is that, see, they're all in Taipei, okay? And see, because of the problems that are going on in China and because of the whole slowdown, these factories out in Taiwan, they were shut down during the pandemic, right? Now there's a huge shortage of these chips. A lot of trucks in the United States can't get parts because the chips aren't around, and the chips are necessary, perhaps not for the actual part, but in order to manufacture the part, you see? And you've had these huge supply chain disruptions because the supply chain itself is so fragile because it all depends on these few factories in Taipei. And they're trying to build these factories in the United States and Canada, desperately trying to, but it takes time. It takes a lot of time, see? And while it takes all that time to build these chip factories, it takes time because it's not only an issue of building the shit, it's finding the people to do it because the knowledge has been lost. Isn't that crazy? The people who could do it, they've forgotten how to do it, or they no longer do it, or they're in other industries and so they don't do it. That's a big problem that they're having in building these factories. It's not that they don't have capital to build the factories. It's not that they don't have the tools to build the factories. It's that they don't have the people with the knowledge. Now, that's one problem. And the other problem is the outright loss of knowledge. Now, this story I read in 4chan years ago. And if any of you guys ever find it, a screenshot of it, because, for the chans, of course, are image boards and they're cyclical image boards. And so it gets to a certain point and they just get wiped, right? And so I lost the story. And this is such a goddamn good story. And so it's about the heart-shaped boxes, see? Okay, so there was this company out in Pennsylvania, where the fuck, in the US, and they manufactured these cardboard heart-shaped boxes. And they manufactured them for this chocolate company. The chocolate company would buy a boatload of these boxes, and they would fill these boxes typically for Valentine's Day in February, right? And so after the last Valentine's Day, the company figured out that they could get these same boxes, but from China at a lot cheaper price. So they told their manufacturer, the company that manufactured these heart-shaped boxes, that they weren't going to be buying them anymore. And so the guy out in Pennsylvania, or whatever the hell it was, it doesn't matter if it's Pennsylvania or not, it's just in the US. That's the point. See, the guy was like, fuck it. What am I going to do? And I've got this stupid machine. And so he just, junked it or changed it or whatever. I forget what the story was, but he no longer had the machine. He used it for something else and reapplied it in such a way that it was impossible now to make heart-shaped boxes. Okay? Because he figured, well, the chocolate manufacturer is going to go with the Chinese company, and that's that. But it turned out that the Chinese company was using this cheap glue, and the cheap glue smelled something awful. So bad that the chocolate company decided not to use them. And so it called up the company in Pennsylvania that used to manufacture its heart-shaped boxes and said, please, 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 make us some boxes. And the company says, we can't. We'll pay you anything. And he says, it's not an issue of money. We don't have the technology to do it anymore. And that seems to have been a true story. It had so many details, and it was such a trivial story overall that I do not believe it was made up. It seems legitimate. And it seemed legitimate also that the denouement of the story was just absurd, because what happened was that the chocolate company wound up sending all the boxes that had gotten in China to this company in Pennsylvania, and they'd gone by hand, like scraping off the bad glue and repasting it with good glue, or glue that didn't smell, something to that effect, and charging the chocolate company an arm and a leg, because the company needed all these boxes for the Valentine's season. See, it's some story like that. It was very amusing, but a key issue. You got to understand the point. See, in the name of efficiency, in the name of profitability, the technology to make the heart-shaped boxes that smelled good, okay, was lost. Mhm. That technology was lost and it was not reacquired. They went through heroic measures to replicate it, but the technology was gone. Okay. And maybe if they'd had another year or two, they could have made it. I mean, heart-shaped box, cardboard box is not particularly difficult to make. I'm sure they could have come up with another machine in a year or so. Okay. But you see the point, the larger point. Technology can be lost and it gets lost all the time. Neoliberal deindustrialization has lost so much technology for the West. We actually think that we have a lot of technology now. We don't realize how much has been lost because it was shipped overseas. And the people who have that knowledge now overseas, it's not that they are overseas competitors and they want to go to war with us or something like that. No, it's that they're way over there, not here. Not here, wheresoever you may live, be it North America or Europe. It's way over in China, way over in Central America, way over in Vietnam, way over wherever the fuck. And if that technology, that microchip center in Taipei goes up in smoke because there's a war or there's just a simple fire or an earthquake or something trivial like that, huh? Then that knowledge is gone forever because the knowledge has been concentrated. And that's the problem with neoliberal globalism. It concentrates information and technology into the hands of very, very few players. And those very few players, they get an awful lot of money. But if they're gone or they somehow lose the technology, then that knowledge, that information, it's gone for all of us, for the whole world. And everything that depends on that technology suffers as a result. The companies in Taiwan that manufacture these chips, they're actually manufacturing them. It's just taking their fucking time about it. Not on purpose, of course. They're trying to manufacture them as quickly as possible. There's huge demand. There's huge premium for these chips. Companies will pay whatever to get these chips in order to get their supply line started. But you see the fragility. If those companies, say, were to be bombed by the Chinese as they invade Taiwan, the rest of the world would be up shit's creek insofar as these chips are concerned. The industrial break was neoliberal deindustrialization. It created this fragility. Now, here comes the industrial riptide. A social crisis comes whereby the industrial economy grinds to a halt. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be a pandemic. It could be a war with China. It could be civil wars. It could be climate change. You might not believe in climate change. I certainly don't. I think it's a crock of shit, but that doesn't matter. It could be that. Some social crisis of whatever fucking sort grinds the economy to a halt. Now, after this halt, it is no longer economically or practically feasible to continue mining for metals or extracting energy, oil, gas, or nuclear. It is easier or cheaper to recycle or scrounge. See? I mean, I'm talking about the after effects, okay? The longer this period of recycling or scrounging, the harder to restart the mining of metals and extraction of fuels. And that would seem to be obvious. See, if you have a very, very sophisticated technology that is halted for a period of time, for whatever reason, restarting it is going to be all kinds of difficult. And we can look at airliners right now as an example. Airliners, if you check them out, they're having all kinds of problems with their airplanes because these airplanes have been sitting there. Something like, if memory serves, something like 20,000 airplane around the world are just sitting there. Okay. I mean, big airliners, right? They're just sitting on the tarmacs or in storage or wherever the fuck. Of course, it's not, with a roofed and climate controlled hangar like in the movies. No, there are too many planes. Like out in Schiphol Airport in Amsterdam, right? KLM has its planes parked right on one of the runways. There are so many goddamn planes that they have no other place to put them. And they just put them right on the fucking runway, on one of them, one of the unused runways. I mean, obviously they're unused. That's why the planes are parked there, right? It's not that the runway is unused because of the parked planes. It's rather the planes are parked because nobody's flying. And so those planes are sitting there. And they've had to have all kinds of choreography to maintain these planes. See? Like, for instance, they have all the planes loaded up with fuel. Why do they have them load them up with fuel? Because if they don't have them load them up with fuel, with wind, they start to move around. They can potentially tip over. Not kidding. Okay. And so they have the planes loaded up with fuel, and the fuel, that's actually good for certain parts of the engine of the plane, but it's bad for other parts. And if they remove the fuel, well, then other parts would suffer and other parts would benefit. So you see, there's always like a trade-off. And a lot of the hydraulics are going, and the hydraulics have to be maintained. And look, even if all the planes all of a sudden started, like, everything went back to normal, lickety split right the fuck now, and right now we're back at 2019, like nothing happened, several of these planes would probably crash because of mechanical problems due to inactivity. Mechanical problems that with regular usage would be known, but because of the lack of use, nobody knows, nobody notices. It's not obvious, you see? And the fact of the matter is, the planes that are being used, they are deciding that they're going to continue to reuse these reduced number of planes because they know for a fact that they're in pretty good shape because they're constantly up in the air, okay? And they have the opportunity to check them. But the planes that are landed, that are not operational, those planes, there are estimates at this time that range from anywhere between 20% and 60% of those 20,000 odd planes will never fly again. Get that. At least 20%. And these are like sane people, not crazy people. They're just saying, look, these planes, they're going to have deteriorated so much that it would be unsafe and unsound to fly them. Simple as that. Between a fifth and 3/5. Holy fucking shit. That's goddamn right. And that's just a year and a half of inactivity. Suppose the mining and fuel and energy centers were inactive for, say, 20 years. They're never restarting. They're never restarting. If the period of recycling and scrounging is long enough, as little as a single full generation, enough to lose the knowledgeable generation and have no replacement, the knowledge of how to mine metals and extract fuels will have been forgotten or lost. And this is obvious. It should be obvious. If you have a period of, say, 25 years, that's a full generation. The people who are experts today, why are they experts? Because they've been around longer, and those guys are in their 40s and 50s. And those guys, in 25 years, they will be in their late 60s to dead, right? And they will not have passed on their knowledge to a younger generation. Those people go, and that knowledge is lost forever. Because, of course, it's not merely just knowing which one is the on-off switch. It's all the little information, the little tricks that you only learn with experience, all the little things that you learn from actually doing something that nothing can teach you. There are so many young people, especially, who think that only that a YouTube video and some book will teach them everything. And that's a lie. That's a total lie. A lot of times, especially on more practical applications like mining, like fuel extraction, you need the guy who's been around longer because he's seen so much and his judgment is such that he'll know. When I was 19 years old, I worked at a mine called Doña Inés de Coyahuasi, which at the time it was a mine project. They just discovered it. And I worked there as a translator. There were these, it was a summer job that I got through a family friend. And it was me helping out with these Canadian engineers who were there, right? And these Canadian engineers, right, a couple of them were just like old and just kind of like, I mean, it seemed that they were having a rough time, right? And they told me, well, I'm getting paid $250,000. And this was in 1987. And they were getting paid $20,000 a month to be up there to look at rocks because they knew they were old as the hills. They weren't in great shape. I remember there was one of them who was sucking down oxygen most of the time because of the altitude, right? And he was carrying around a oxygen bottle with on a little carry-on thing, like a little hand truck, and he would pull it, and he had the mask like around his chin, and whenever he felt it, he would like put it over his nose and mouth and turn on the O2 and suck down a little bit. And he thought it was really funny because he would get high. He thought it was hilarious, right? Because you get high when you suck down O2, especially at altitude. And he told me, man, yeah, I'm getting paid 20 grand. And I'm like, why? I mean, other guys must know as much, and not as much as me. Yeah, he was so old, but he knew shit. And there were these deep trenches that they'd cut, right, with these excavators to examine the rock, right? And he just like look around, like, and with these glasses, and he looked like he could barely see. And he's just like, oh, that's important. And he had this like junior geologist like writing down every fucking thing that the old guy said, you know. And yeah, that's why they were paying him, because of the experience. See, and a lot of these technical jobs, the guys with experience can figure shit out. They die off without passing on their knowledge. You're up shit's creek. See, and as a civilization, okay, I'm talking like the macro as a society. Okay, so yeah. So why won't the industrial wave swell up again? Okay, because up to this point, I'm saying in this industrial wave theory, I'm saying that industries have swole up from the Bronze Age up until the assembly line. That was the swell of it, the industrial swell. Then it really crested. That is, it reached its apogee during the period between the assembly line and the communications and computer revolution of the late 20th, early 21st century, right? That's when it crested. Now, the industrial wave began to break starting in the 1970s, 80s with deindustrialization and globalism, right? And the riptide, which one could argue has not yet arrived, or one could argue is in the middle of arriving, I would argue it's in the middle, is a social crisis whereby the industrial economy grinds to a halt. I don't think anybody would really disagree that it has ground to a halt. The pandemic and what I believe is an upcoming war with China pretty much seals that deal. And a lot of people have been mentioning Serpenza's video. His name is Serpent ZA. If you look him up on YouTube, his most recent YouTube video is what he calls, is this declaration of war from China? And he's a very interesting character. He's a South African who lived for a decade in China. He speaks and reads fluent Mandarin. He married a Chinese woman. I suspect he's actually intelligence. He gives me that vibe, Anyway, this guy, he's just like, man, China has just declared war. He did a whole video about it, and his argument is very compelling. And I have to say, with a point of pride, that was after my video saying that we're going to have a war with China. So yeah, I win. Yeah, again. But anyway, the point. This social crisis leads to a halt in industrial production. If this industrial halt lasts long enough, you're going to lose the knowledge to restart the whole thing. You're going to have to start from scratch. Now, why won't the industrial wave swell up again? Well, because since there are no more readily available metals or fuels, there's now a catch-22 problem. The metals and fuels that are available that are in the ground, of course, require a technology that cannot be reached without those metals and fuels. You see the problem? See, there's fuel in the earth. There are metals in the earth. But to reach that fuel, to reach those metals, you need fuel and metals that are not available. For all intents and purposes, it's locked away forever. Okay? That's what would happen if our current industrial civilization collapses totally, like the Roman Empire type collapse, and we try to rebuild 500 years, 1,000 years from now. There will be no rebuilding. Okay? Now, how do we avoid this fate? Well, we have to avoid globalization at all costs. We have to make redundant industrial hubs around the world. Right now we have one place in Taiwan that makes all these, chips that are like really essential. We have to have a dozen such places scattered all over the world. We have to make it a global industrial policy to have these hubs everywhere scattered around, so that if one place in the world, if one area of the world, one continent of the world gets shut down or has a social crisis, political crisis, environmental crisis, whatever the fuck, the others can pick up the slack. We need that. A total global industrial policy that prioritizes redundancy, having redundant hubs for each technological sector everywhere in the world. And we consciously decide that we are willing to spend more so that we have these multiple hubs around the world. And therein lies the problem. This multi-hub approach is not economically, socially, or politically acceptable at this time, because people are too short-sighted. They would not see it. They would not see the benefits of having multiple hubs for multiple industries scattered throughout the world. They just wouldn't see it, and therefore they wouldn't do it. You see? That's the problem. And it's such a simple solution. See? If, each, not country, but each region, I mean, if you look at Europe, you could say, Western Europe and Eastern Europe, North Africa, the near Middle East, Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, the far Middle East, Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan. Then, moving forward, like in each of these regions, more or less, you had some hub. Each of them had a little hub of whatever technology spread out. Then you wouldn't have this concern, this filter, because what are we talking about here? The human filter. What is going to prevent us human beings from expanding across the galaxy? What is the reason that no other society in some other planet, no other species has broken out of their planet and gone on to conquer the universe? I think that this is the problem, that the planet industrializes, because all the other issues that I mentioned in the filters, right? Unicellular life, multicellular life, animals, intelligent animals who use tools and whatnot, right? A civilization that gets on track to build interstellar colonization. All of those, well, we've done it, okay? And it's likely that not many more have done it, but I'm sure a few have. But it's probably this problem, the industrial wave theory, the industrial collapse theory, call it what you will. The society creates an industrial civilization, but in this natural swell, crest, break, and riptide cycle, where it grows, it reaches an apogee, it crashes, and then pulls back before swelling, rising up again, crashing and pulling back. Well, what's happened is that, see, it can swell, rise, crash, and fall back, but it can't swell again because of this problem of reaching extractable metals and fuels. Once they're gone, and you go through a riptide period, a dark ages, as I believe we are about to experience. And by the way, this dark ages, we're not going to see the worst of it. Okay, the worst of it is like 300 years from now. Okay, we're going to be seeing it, how it slides, but none of you listening to me today, you might be like, I'm guessing like the oldest person listening to me now is like 18, and you live to be 80, 90 years old, say. In 70 years from now, which is the year what, 2090? Yeah, things are still going to be trundling along, okay? These are long-scale historical periods, okay? And the collapse, the bottom of the barrel, the end of the road, right? The dark ages. That's far into the future. We can't even see it from here. We can't even imagine it from here. Or actually, no, we can't see it, but we can imagine it. And I'll tell you what I think it's going to be like. See? This great filter, this industrial collapse, because of this, there will be a mass die-off, but it's not going to be in like a year or 2 years or 10 years or even 50 years. It's going to be slow. It's going to be nice and slow because there's enough shit, industrial shit lying around and enough possibility to recycle and repurpose stuff that we're going to be able to trundle along for a good long while. Okay. And as we trundle along, I mean, my thinking is, and after the some of the news and analysis that's come up over the last week, I'm almost certain that there's going to be a war come the spring of next year between the U.S. and China. And the more I think about it, the more likely I believe it's going to be a nuclear war. But I'm not particularly concerned, by the way. I think a lot of cities will be burned up in a nuclear firestorm. Maybe 10, maybe 30, somewhere between that number. It's not going to be that bad. Okay. A lot of people are like, oh my God, a nuclear holocaust. When I was a kid, I remember one time there was this uncle of mine. He was the captain of a submarine in Chile. He was a naval officer, a very capable guy. And one time he said very casually, oh, it might be nuclear war, but it's no big deal. And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? But then I started thinking about it over the years. I mean, at the time when I was a teenager, I was outraged. And of course, I was under the narrative that a nuclear war is bad at all costs. But as I've gotten older, I realized that, a nuclear war is horrifying for the people who experience it. But see, the Earth is a really big fucking place. I've driven a lot of it, okay? And I can tell you, it's a huge fucking place. I drove across Europe. If they dropped, say, a dozen nuclear weapons in Europe, most of Europe would survive. 95% of it would survive. You see, if they blew up London, Paris, Berlin, Rome, Madrid, and every single capital in Europe, well, it would be horrible for the people living there, no question. I'm not doubting that. I'm not belittling that. But I'm saying that a lot of the fucking countries would be left over. A lot of the continent would be left over. Nuclear war is not the end of the world, okay? It's not the problem of the destruction of a nuclear war. It's the problem of the social chaos that would emerge after. That's the real problem. See, the lockdowns, right? It's shutting everybody down for a year or whatever the fuck. In some places going on 2 years. See, all of this, it's not an issue of destruction per se. It's social destruction, not physical destruction. If London were nuked, that would be awful. But the real problem would not be that London is nuked, but rather so much information, technology, leadership, ability, knowledge would be lost. And it would not be replaced. And that's the problem. Okay? If London were nuked, the United Kingdom would rapidly devolve into an agrarian society. An agrarian society and a lot of technologies, a lot of medicines, and a lot of other very crucial and life-saving things, technologies, processes, what have you, will be lost if London went up in smoke, right? And that's the problem, see? It's not the destruction of London that's the problem. It's all the information and industrialization and technology that is lost. So if there is a severe social crisis, i.e., a nuclear war with China, and a whole bunch of bombs get thrown around, the vast majority of people would be fine because they wouldn't get hit with a nuclear weapon, now would they? Of course not. If you happen to be in one of the cities that got nuked, well, sorry about that, buddy. But everybody else, most of us, quite frankly, we'd be fine. We wouldn't even know that they dropped a nuclear weapon unless we saw it on TV or online or whatever the fuck, right? Yeah, we wouldn't know. I mean, come on. If they nuke New York City right the fuck now, would it affect you? Of course not. But it wouldn't affect you personally directly right now. But a lot of things that come through or happen because of New York City would affect you. And you see what I mean? If there is a large enough social catastrophe, which I believe is going to happen over the next 6 to 12 months with this war with China, which I'm thinking more and more likely to happen. Well, what will happen is that, see, the knock-on effects of this war would lead to an industrial collapse. it would lead to a new dark ages. And it wouldn't be a nuclear winter or any of that bullshit. All that shit is science fiction, okay? That's not the issue. It's the social collapse. Because here I am, me, Gonzalo Lira, i.e., aka CRP, living in Kharkov, Ukraine. And my computer is an Apple computer, as they say, made in China, but designed in California, right? I'm talking to you with a Rode microphone made in Australia, a Logitech camera made in wherever the fuck Logitech gets made. And all this stuff I would cease to be able to get it, because if Los Angeles and New York were nuked, then there would be no more shipping of Apple products anywhere in the world. And so I would not be able to replace this computer. I would not be able to replace this microphone when it inevitably fails, because they all fail. It's inevitable, right? And so because of these failures, I would lose the computer, I would lose the microphone, I would lose my ability to talk to you. And I would have to figure out how to scrounge around here in Kharkov. I wouldn't be able to depend on getting technology from the United States or Europe or whatever the fuck. If there's a nuclear war with China, right, they're going to nuke lots of ports out in the Far East. I'm not going to be able to get a car, I have my eye on a Suzuki Jimny. I'm probably going to get it, and I have to get through some administrative hassles here in order to get it, But I want to get that fucking car because it's a very practical car, and I like the design and all the rest of it. But if they nuke some ports out in the Far East, no more Suzuki Jimnys, not new ones at any rate. So you see the situation. It's not the nuclear war in and of itself. The devastation, the loss of human life would be horrible. But even assuming that they dropped 30 nuclear weapons on 30 different cities, and each of these cities were huge, just say for the sake of argument, there were 5 million people in each of these 30 cities. That's 150 million people who die. That's horrible. There are nearly 8 billion people. 150 million is just a drop in the bucket. I mean, it's a fraction. It's a small fraction, hell, what the fuck? Why not? Let's just do the math for shits and giggles. I got a calculator right here. And so 150 million divided by, what is it, 7.8 billion? That's 1.9% of the total population. That's 30 nuclear weapons blowing up 30 cities of 5 million people each. 5 million people each is like roughly the size of London or Paris. 30 of those cities gone. It wouldn't be a drop in the bucket, less than 2% of the global population. But the impact on the industry. So you see the fear. We have created such fragility in our system that if there is a global war, we're not going to recover as human beings. This is the great filter. And right now we are living in it. We are living through it. And what happens over the next 10 years? And perhaps longer. Because you see, it could be that we avoid war next year. But then there's the year after that and the year after that. And see, the issue becomes, of course, if there's no conception of how fragile our civilization actually is, then people are going to be willing to take all kinds of chances and not do all kinds of foolish things in order to get ahead, to get a leg up on their opponents, irrespective of the damage that it does to humanity. And so that's why I think that even if there is no war with China in, the next year or the next 10 years or the next 20 years or the next 100 years, some other crisis will emerge, some other social crisis, because there's no conception of how fragile our industrial civilization actually is. And that's why, going back to the earlier slide, the great filters, and here they are in front of you. The number one great filter was the right star system, then reproductive molecules like RNA, then simple single cell life, then complex single cell life, then sexual reproduction, then multicellular life, then intelligent animals who can use tools, and finally a civilization advancing towards interstellar colonization. I believe that this is where the great filter for all of civilizations in every planet that's ever had a civilization, this is where it ends. The civilization industrializes and it uses up its easily available, easily extractable metals and fuels. And then, as a normal process, whereby in every and I believe this, that probably in every alien civilization the same kind of cycle applies, a wave theory that, it swells, it crests, it breaks, it pulls back, to swell and crest and break again and pull back again. Always this cycle, these waves. Go to the ocean, and what do you see? Wave after wave. Some are quite large and some are quite small. Some take their time and some of them are abrupt, but it's always the same. The wave swells, the wave crests, it breaks and then pulls back. Every time. I think that in every alien civilization and our current human civilization, this problem of industrialization hits everyone. Every alien civilization hits this great filter. And we are actually living through it now. And if we lose the technology, we will not be able to rebuild. We will not be able to reindustrialize to have a new civilization. This is my argument. And just as those planes that were grounded because of the pandemic, a substantial fraction of them are now likely useless, and that fraction grows with every month, every week, every day, every hour that they're sitting there idle. They break down little by little and become just slag. The same thing will happen to our civilization. Because, see, an industrial civilization, it's a perpetual motion machine. It has to keep on going. It's like that shark, in that apocryphal story that a shark always has to keep swimming or else it dies. That's actually kind of technically true. As I understand it, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I understand that what's going on is that the shark needs to constantly swim so that water flows through its gills so that it can breathe. Whether it's true or not, doesn't matter. It's a good metaphor, and certainly a very good metaphor for industrial society. We have to keep moving. We have to keep building and growing. And if we stop because of a social crisis, unavoidable social crisis, that is a crisis that we could avoid if we had some conception of what we might lose if we allow our industrial society to stop. Well, once the society stops, and once we allow some sort of great war to stop everything, we're fucked. And a final note. Have you ever thought to yourself that we have already had a near stoppage of industrial society in the past? Yeah, we did. World War II. In August of 1945, Japan was in ruins. China was in the middle of a civil war, and it was agrarian. It was nothing. The Soviet Union was in ruins. All of Europe was in ruins. The UK was in ruins. The whole fucking planet, industrially speaking, was fucked. Except the US. They were untouched because they had the buffer of the Pacific Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean, the US and Canada. And they were able to restart the industrial revolution for everybody. In fact, it's not that they restarted, they never stopped because they were buffered. They were buffered, and because of it, they were easily able to help Europe rebuild. And the Soviets were able to rebuild too by just observing what was going on in Europe, stealing a few exemplars of their technology and rebuilding from that. They were able to, see? And they were able to buy the technologies that they might have needed to extract the metals and extract the fuels that they had in their home, in their country, rather, the Soviet Union, that is, in order to get reindustrialized. And Japan had nothing, no metals and no fuels. Well, they got all the assistance from the Americans. That's how they rebuilt. Ditto with South Korea after the Korean War. And so you see the point, see? You had a place, a hub that was untouched by the calamity of the Second World War. And that hub, untouched by the calamity of the Second World War, was able to reseed all the other places that had been devastated. But if this time around we have sort of global stop, or if key technology centers are destroyed or seriously disrupted, such as Taiwan with this chip situation, then there will be no way to reseed the rest of the world now, will there? You see where I'm driving at? Yeah. Yeah. And this is where I'm thinking. And I think that this has happened to every alien civilization. Yeah. And I can't believe that I'm talking about contemporary politics and, the search for extraterrestrial life all in one fucking webinar. But there you go. See? So anyway, I'm going to take questions. I know that this is a wild ride, but I think that this shit is really interesting to think about. And I think it's worth thinking about it. Okay. Because I'm actually thinking of, I'm more and more thinking of setting up some sort of enclave, not necessarily in Poltava. I mean, Poltava really is the middle of nowhere. Okay. It would be smarter to do it in Kharkov. Because also in Kharkov, there are women, lots of women, because there are a bunch of universities here. And so a lot of guys, Western guys, capable guys, would want to come here because it's cheap. There's plenty of food that can be grown nearby. I mean, in the outskirts of the city, farming and whatnot. And there are a lot of women. And so there's something to be built here, So it's something I've been thinking about. And that's how I stumbled on this whole notion that I've outlined in this presentation. I hope you enjoyed it. And so, well, before anything else, let me just post in the chat the invitation. And I'm going to step away for just a second, just less than a minute. I have to go and turn on the lights because it's goddamn dark here. So hang on just a moment. Okay, so let's get started with some questions. Hannes is up first. So, Hannes, are you there?
Yeah, so let's get started with some questions. Hannes is up first.
I can hear myself, Hannes. So can you turn off the mic?
Just wait a second. Is it?
Yeah, sounds fine. How's it going, Hannes?
Okay. What's up? Yeah. Thank you for this very interesting webinar. That was something different and refreshingly different. And well, I'm a geologist and I'm specialized in mining and finding deposits. And I think you to a certain extent, you're damn right, because all the easy deposits have already been mined. Because why should you start with the difficult stuff? You take the easy stuff first. Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And the thing is, right now, at least in the West, the Chinese doing it a little bit different. We are focused very much on economics. So there are a lot of deposits, especially in Europe, for example, and North America, where you would have a lot of, let's say, copper, tin, iron, and stuff like this. But it's not really economic to mine it because you can buy it cheaper from Brazil, South Africa, what have you. So there's a lot of knowledge that was here and it's gone now. But on the other hand, it's not really that hard to start a mine because you blast the stuff, you grind it down, that's pretty easy to do. You separate the ore from the waste material, and I think that this knowledge is actually, it's hard to get lost because all the machinery, you have it all over the world and it's not really difficult. So I don't think that we would actually run out of the metals, but I think it comes then down to the demand for the metals. Because what I find very interesting today is that, not to say it in a very drastic way, every idiot today, even the poor ones, they have all the high-tech technology. And if you think back maybe to the 18th century, all the high-tech stuff was limited to the kings, maybe to the church, to the top tradesmen, so maybe 5 or 10% of the population, whereas now everyone can get it. And this means that the demand for all these metals and all these technological products is much, much higher than it has been before. And this, I think, creates a lot of problems. And I think if you talk about all this green energy and sustainability and stuff like this, actually the real thing to do, and this is completely suicidal for any politician to talk about it, would be limiting the consume of all these technology, because you don't have the metals.
Yeah.
And then I'm not wanting this to happen, because it would be bad for me.
Of course, nobody's going to say it, but that's the truth. Yeah. Yeah, because all these rare earth metals, I think that there isn't enough. I'm guessing that there isn't enough to go around for everybody's
no, actually, rare earth metals are not really rare. We have them all around the world. The thing is, this is a group of 23 or 24 metals, and they stick together chemically. So if you mine a deposit, it's very hard and very dirty to separate each of these metals, and only the Chinese want to do it. You have deposits even in Germany, you have them in Australia and the United States, everywhere, but nobody wants to do the dirty work, so they let it get done by the Chinese. But actually, there's no geological limitation. But only the Chinese knew how to do it, and the West now slowly starts to wake up and make some mines on its own. But the problem is that the Chinese have a monopoly, so every time a mine in Australia or US starts, the Chinese dump the price, and then the deposit in Australia and US becomes uneconomic, so they have to close it again. They did this a few times, because the Chinese, they know how it works.
Let me ask you something, but you would agree. I mean, you said that mining certain, simple metals like copper or whatever, for instance. I know that mining copper is not particularly difficult. It's just a lot of work, but it's not difficult. But like, say, extracting oil from the ocean, that's not an easy thing. It certainly doesn't seem so to me. And that's the thing I'm thinking about. I'm also thinking very seriously about nuclear reactors. Those things are very complicated. And so if you lose the knowledge to operate them, it could become a serious problem. So, I mean, apart from the environmental problem, right? And so, look, this is my theory at this point, okay? That this might be the filter. And the only thing I regret is that I'm not going to live long enough to see if this is an accurate projection or not. I'm not going to live long enough in the sense of I'm not going to live, 500 years to see it, because I'd want to see it, when we get to 500 years, not like, next 50 years, fuck that, but the thing that I'm thinking about, okay, and you, Hannes, tell me what you think of this, that it could be that if we lose this technological, this knowledge of technology, which you agree can happen, if we lose this knowledge of technology, and we are not able to extract the easily available, there's no more easily extractable metals and fuels and whatnot, that our dark ages, we will regress to an agrarian society, and it will be a permanent agrarian society. That's the thing I neglected to round off in my webinar, and so I'm rounding it off now with you. Right. My thinking is that we would devolve into sort of like the feudal village of the European low Middle Ages, something like that, and it would be permanent, and we'd never get out of it, because there would never be the materials necessary to get out of that permanent dark ages. Go ahead.
I've seen a video on YouTube about this stuff a while ago, and the dude was thinking the direction that at first all these technological things would become increasingly expensive. So for the poorer part of the population, it would be simply not feasible anymore to use these. So you would have like a decline in technological standards for the large part of the population, but let's say the upper 10% or what have you, they could sustain it for quite a while. And I think then it would become down to the few nerds who have like the nuclear reactor in their basement because they think it's cool. That these guys, they maybe figure out to reproduce it. And it's just a handful of people in the end, I would say, that could do it. And if these guys sit together and started, then you would have some enclaves of technological, maybe not development, but they can keep up with what they have. They don't lose the knowledge. And then maybe you can turn around the tides, but I think it comes down to a lot of uncertainties, a lot of things that could happen, that could be, that maybe one of these guys dies in a car accident and the knowledge is lost. But maybe this guy goes to the car 5 minutes later and he doesn't. So I think it's hard to predict these things.
Oh yeah, it's totally impossible. But let me ask you a final question before I let you go. Would you agree? Okay, do you think that my outline, my thoughts on this, do you think they're reasonable, or do you see some obvious flaw in it?
No, I think they're reasonable.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a little bit too dark, and yeah.
Well,
because
it can't be.
Right now,
what can I say, man? Armageddon, yo.
I think right now we see so much negative information that has an impact on our thinking. If I would ask a Chinese that is like China #1, I think these guys would think differently about the subject. Maybe we have the Chinese coming on and stating his opinion. Okay, yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. Take it easy, man. Hey, Abdi, how's it going?
Hello?
Yeah, here, I'm right here. What's on your mind, man?
Hey, Coach, how you been doing?
Pretty good. And yourself?
Doing good. It's been a while since I've been here, so I'll try to keep my questions short and sweet.
No problem. Take your time.
So, first off, I think regarding this whole collapse situation, you were talking about how they move industry from one area to another. I think something interesting that happens is this also goes back to how people are short-sighted, and to be honest, people are just selfish in general.
Mm-hmm.
What would happen is that, let's take the West, for example. In the West, people don't really feel like working, not just financially, but because they feel like they don't get anything out of it, so to speak. Like right now, personally, right now I'm an engineer.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm starting to be an engineer. I'm a master's right now, almost done. And when I see like the situation going on right now, like globally and stuff, it just sort of like touches me in a way where I'm like, what's even the point of me working? You know what I mean? It's better to work, but at the same time, it's sort of like this sort of hopelessness where it's like, well, if I do this, let's say I go into industry, for example, right? If I go into an industry, then I'm going to be stuck there until I'm 60. I won't be able to do other aspects of my life that I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of other people, like especially when you see how opioids become more and more popular with people, it's sort of like the situation where, it's like, okay, I don't know why I'm working, and even if I work, I don't feel like I'm getting anything out of it. So the elites are selfish, and then the people who could learn, they're just sort of like, frick it, I don't care. There's no point in me trying to strive
what's
for
going
it.
on is that our society is no longer giving people meaning in their lives, a justification to be working in industry or working in whatever. See, you Abdi, you're going to get your degree. You're going to be able to work at some firm and bring in a decent living, but you're like, why? Why bother? There's no incentive because there's no meaning. There's no purpose. You don't have any kind of mountaintop that you aspire to, and this is the key issue of our contemporary society, because for different reasons. Okay, for a long period of time, we had the notion of the ambition of people was to have a home of their own, with 2 cars, a wife, and 2.2 kids, and a dog. And that mountaintop, that ambition, satisfies most people. But we have so belittled it and degraded it over the last couple of decades, especially, that nobody feels that they can achieve it. They dream of it, especially men, but nobody thinks that they can actually achieve it. And therefore, they're just drifting through life without any kind of meaning. And I think, would you agree with me that that's the problem?
I wouldn't say personally, because again, I have other goals I want to do. That's like the big difference between me and like other people that I know. But for most people I know, they just sort of, they're not complicated. They just want to have like a family of their own and stuff. But when things are really this materialistic and then things feel so out of your control, they would rather retreat to gaming video games all day and smoking weed, to be honest.
Yeah.
And it makes me really sad. I don't like it.
No, nobody does. because there's nothing sadder than watching all of the squandered energy and squandered talent. It's just, being thrown away with OnlyFans and video games and weed. It's pathetic.
It gets me really upset, and if I feel like people on the personal level, I feel like they shouldn't do it, but at the same time, when you look at it from a macro scale, it's like I don't blame them. Maybe I could have been like that. I hope I never become like that. But that.
And what are your goals?
My goals? After my master's program, because I wanted to do my master's for a little bit to see how industry was. I want nothing to do with it now.
Because why?
Because I feel like I see people like the professors in the university and stuff, and I'm like, their eyes look dead, like they have no ambitions. And I had a father, and he was a professor too. And when I had an accident back when I was really, really young and had to be hospitalized for a long time, and he decided to quit his work at the university, and then he decided to work as a janitor, and then he ended up he made ends meet. That was the important thing, and he had to spend more time with the family. So I thought, well, it's better that I get life experience and I can have a bigger family as much as possible, and spend time with them versus trying to be a corporate slave. Because this what's the word I'm thinking of? This middle class hell that most people I know live through. And this is what leads them to thinking like this. I don't want anything to do with it. I would rather get as much life experience as possible, and then meet a nice girl, and then make I don't know 5-6 babies. That's the plan. Hope I'm not oversharing here.
No, that's all right. That's not perfectly fine. How old are you, by the way?
23.
23. Yeah. And the problem is finding the right girl.
Shouldn't be too difficult. If there's less competition, I don't mind.
Well, no, you should focus on trad communities and a friend of mine. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and he met some very traditional Catholic group. He's Catholic, and he met some very traditional Catholic youth group kind of thing online. And he interacted with them a lot online, and to the point that he finally decided to fly out to where several of them were living and, meet with them in person, a few of them. And he was saying, look, right now I got 4 girls who are prospects. This guy's in his mid-30s, successful corporate guy, doing very well for himself. And he said, I've met so far 4 girls who are in their early to mid-20s. And he described them to me, and we were just talking about which one. And he said all 4 of them have their priorities really straight. They want to get married and have kids and have a happy family. That's the priority. They don't want to do any career. If they work, it's just maybe some extra pocket money kind of situation. And only once the kids are old enough to be in school, and only if the schools are not teaching them crazy shit, right? And he had it. This guy I was talking to, he had it really figured out. And he said, look, the key issue was finding this community. And he said that if you start looking for these communities, you find them. And that was really interesting. And that makes a hell of a lot of sense, especially now with the social chaos going on. So yeah, I would suggest you check that out, man. Maybe you'll find somebody. Maybe you'll meet the future mother of your babies, buddy.
I hope so. But this brings me to my second question. This is a little more technical. So last time, I wish I could ask this question last week. It's a little off topic, but we were talking about a social crisis, correct? Let's use COVID as an example at the moment. I remember last week people were talking about how Sweden didn't lock down because it was financially unfeasible for them.
Yep.
Due to the welfare state being so stretched out. So this is my thinking. The reason why this COVID thing hasn't ended per se, especially in the West, is because too many people are making money off of it. And they're guising it under a moral a moral curtain. It looks like, oh, we care about people, but you turn it around it's Wizard of Oz and it's just money in the background.
It's all about money.
So which brings the question, if there's an economic fallout, because people have been talking about that for a while because of the either it's hyperinflation or it's deflationary, one way or the other. Because right now we're teetering. It doesn't really matter. If there's an economic fallout, I don't think these COVID restrictions would last any further, just because these corporations, these governments would be so stretched out, people would be in such poverty. Either A, they wouldn't care about the restrictions, they just say, frick it, I don't care anymore. Or B, it would be a situation where the government's like, okay, we need to get things rolling again, so just let's forget all of this stuff and let's get back to normal life. Because if we don't, we're going to end up like hindering ourselves even more. And I want to know what your thoughts were on that.
Well, my thing is that, see, once people aren't getting food and they're losing their housing, that's when it's all over. Okay, it's simple as that. They have to have entertainment and food and lodging. Okay, entertainment in the sense of keeping their minds occupied. I mean, look, what's happening in the West, okay, it's a complete collapse of the whole fucking society. I mean, they're just throwing it out the fucking window, right? With these stimulus checks and having the whole population on the dole, basically. This is a fucking disaster. And it's demoralizing for people, especially the more capable people. Look, the after effects of this shit are going to be decades, okay? It's a catastrophe, whatever way you look at it. But the thing is, see, people only get up off their asses once there's no more food, okay? And, if it's deflationary or inflationary, it doesn't really matter. If there's no food, that's when shit gets heavy, okay? I can tell you, like in Chile, for instance, in 70 to 73, which is like my closest direct knowledge of social collapse. When there was, with the inflation and the lines, it wasn't that big of a deal. It's when there really wasn't any food, even in the black market, that's when things went tits up. That's when things really went tits up. They started doing what were known as cacerorazos. A cacerola is a big pot for like stew. I mean, every country has the basic stew where you just throw shit in it and make a stew to feed as many people as possible, right? Mm-hmm. And so all these women would take these big pots with these big wooden spoons, and they'd march, carrying the pot in one hand and with the other banging the inside, the empty pot with the wooden spoon. It makes a hell of a racket, right? And they do that, at nighttime from the windows when the government declared curfew, or else they'd go out there marching in the streets. When people don't have food, that's when things go tits up, okay? And so my thinking is that we got to wait for that moment to come, okay? I mean, a lot of people are saying that the social passports and shit, but you have to make it existential. Once it becomes existential, that's when people wake up, okay? Until then, the sad reality is that people are willing to put up with anything, Like I posted on my Telegram channel those videos of that Australian concentration camp, the so-called quarantine camp. Yeah. And for those of you who don't know, my Telegram channel is at Real CRP. Okay. Go check it out. And anyway, all these people, they were just placid as Hindu cows. Okay. They're getting their food, and they're relatively comfortable, even though it's totally stupid. And there they were in the concentration camp. So people will put up with a lot of shit, but the moment they lose it is when they don't have food. So wait for that moment.
All right. Okay? Thank you very much for your time. See ya.
No problem. You take it easy, man.
Got it.
All the best.
Mm-hmm.
Bye.
Bye.
Jonathan, how's it going?
Doing great, Coach. How about yourself?
Pretty good. What's on your mind?
That's good. I would just like to say I have similar parallels to Abdi's view as well. Mainly because my dad was a janitor. Similar viewpoint of leaving work. And what I've done is I've actually had to take on his job at night because he's disabled. He can't work anymore. But I'm currently in Florida, as I've said in the past. But my main view is during this whole war, when it does happen, because it will happen. I'm like 99% sure we're going to war.
Why do you think so?
I think mainly because of the whole aggression view with China and Japan, and specifically Taiwan. But I feel that, like you said before in the past, what's going to happen is the Chinese will just invade Taiwan and just either fucking level the place or claim it their own, and the U.S. is going to do nothing about it. Well, because we've completely lost all relations with most countries. And apologies if I sound bad. I'm actually sick, so I might have the China virus.
Made in China virus.
Okay. Yeah, possibly. But what I view Florida as a good stronghold. I'd love to move to Europe, but because of my circumstances, I can't do it. You know, I have disabled grandparents. I have my dad here. I have family here. But what do you think's a good move? As in homesteading here in Florida, just hunkering down and riding the whole thing out until I can move out to Europe? Or
Well,
will I not be able to move?
where in Europe would you want to move to?
I'd like to move to maybe Hungary or somewhere in the east, somewhere where I can grow. Because at least here in Florida, there's still good manufacturing
Mhm.
strongholds here. Specifically, everything defense, everything that has to do with the DoD or any type of weapons, it's all here.
Yeah. Well, my thinking
But
is that probably in the States, I did a video on this before, but I have to repeat it. Alaska.
yeah,
That's the place. The more I think about it, it's cheap land. It's out of the way. People aren't going to hassle you. It's so fucking far that nobody's going to hassle you. And so I think that you should really look at the possibility of Alaska. Alaska might be where it's at.
what do you think about strategically? I mean, I agree with you on that because I remember that video a few months ago when you did it, and I
Yep.
agree 100% because wasn't
Okay,
it
it's
was
out of the way. It's out of the way.
yeah. Oh no, I agree. Yeah,
It's temperamentally conservative because even when they say that they're lefty hippie liberals, right? It's a difficult land to survive in. So you got to know how to handle yourself with a gun. You got to look out for the bears and the moose and whatever the fuck, right? It's no joke, right? It's easily defensible if the American communist armed forces, the People's Liberation Army of America decides to try to conquer it. It's easy to defend, and it's economically viable long term because of the oil up north. And so it could. I think that right now it's like South Korea before the Korean Civil War. Okay, it's it's because South Korea, people don't realize this, but South Korea was the agrarian backward half of Korea, the Korean Peninsula. North Korea was industrialized, advanced, forward thinking. That's where shit was at. North Korea. South Korea was just, rice paddies and nothing else, right? And look how it is now. See? And so I would think that Alaska is where I mean, if you're an American, a lot of people say Texas. A lot of people say Florida. But see, Texas is easy to invade. It has no natural borders. And Florida, pretty much the same thing. You can roll it up without that much of a hassle. Okay. But Alaska, Jesus fucking Christ. And it's all fucking wilderness out there. Okay.
yeah.
So that's what I would say. Alaska. That's my suggestion.
I couldn't agree more. Mainly because I was thinking about how Florida. It's basically it is the lowest state in the United States compared
Mhm.
to Texas, but it's surrounded by water. So if there's ever any type of natural disaster that takes place and the whole United States is collapsed during that time, you're on your own. It's
Yeah.
literally like being like Cuba when a fucking huge hurricane comes through. You have no
Yeah,
chance.
but it's still plugged into the mainland. Okay,
Yeah,
it still can be taken. Okay, but if you have a bunch of people in Alaska who want to make sure that nobody takes it, it's easy to defend, and it's so big that if you're a dissident and you have a antagonistic regime that's trying to persecute you, you can just fade into the scenery and they'll never find you. It's a huge fucking state. It's bigger than Texas, okay? And of course on the map, because of the Mercator projection, it seems larger than it actually is, but I've been there. I've driven across the whole fucking thing from Prudhoe Bay all the way to Anchorage, okay? And I'm telling you, that place, you want to get lost in a place, you want people not to find you, that's the place to go.
perfect
And
place for the Ted Krasinski hut.
Well,
To be
not merely the
honest,
Ted Kaczynski of making bonds. I'm certainly not in favor of that by any stretch of the
Oh yeah,
imagination. But getting to a place where nobody's going to hassle you, and like-minded people are all around. And what's also key is that you got to keep in mind that the people out there, they are temperamentally American. If you go to Europe, for instance, you go to Hungary or you go to Eastern Europe, It is a completely different mentality. I mean, you got to understand that. I mean, like Hungary, for instance. I've been to Hungary. It's beautiful. Budapest is lovely. One of the most beautiful cities I've ever seen. The language is incomprehensible. I mean, dude, you don't even like understand it a little bit. Okay. I mean, I listen to Russian. I don't speak Russian, but I can sort of like figure out a few things, and more or less, because there are words here and there that are Latin root or Greek root, and sort of like, yeah, like when they say like, they say something and they say, normale, normale, normal, and what they
Right.
mean is like, oh, everything's going okay. And you can sort of like piece together what they're saying. In Hungarian, zero. It's like fucking aliens talking. Okay.
Yeah.
And of course that brings a completely different cultural mentality and a cultural baggage. But in Alaska, everybody's an American. They speak the same language you do. They think the way you do. They have the same priorities. Only their environment makes them more independent and more willing to just more independent, I mean, not
Yeah.
so soy boy cucked out, like the rest of America, because that's what I see in the rest of America. But
Yeah, and I agree because I'll go to the gym and go rock climbing or wherever, and all I see are soy boys and cucks. And I'm one of the guys who isn't. But funny enough, actually, I met a guy at the gym on Friday. He's Spanish, and we started talking back and forth. I don't speak great Spanish, but I asked him if he knew Gonzalo Lira, and his eyes just fucking lit up. He's like, "No way, really?" And like we started like talking, and I got his number. But he's pretty sad. I sent him the Patreon link, so hopefully he joins. But
yeah, I hope so too.
yeah,
So,
but
and
anyways,
thanks a lot, Jonathan, man. I appreciate that.
yeah, of course, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for your tips.
Oh, you take it easy, man. Hey, Sharma, how's it going?
It's going good. How you do, coach?
Pretty good, pretty good. Okay, I'm gonna take Iberian and Laris, and then I'm gonna go because unfortunately I have a commitment. But I really want to get to you guys. So tell me, Sharma, what's on your mind?
So I'll just jump right to the question. What industries do you think would be good if you wanna learn things from the scratch? Like you said, keep things
I
non-global.
don't know. I don't know. I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, I haven't thought it through that far. You'd have to figure it out for yourself. I really wouldn't know. I mean, I'm not thinking that far ahead. So, and it depends on so many factors that I can tell you. Yeah.
Okay, coach. All right, that's
Yeah.
it.
Oh, that's it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
You take it
Thank
easy,
you.
Sharma. Cheer up. Stop smoking that dope.
I'm
Hey, Iberian, how's it going?
Hey, everything's doing well. I'm gonna ask. I'm kind of obsessed about China a little bit. Ever since I've seen them rise. I'm young. I'm a little. How can I say, surprised because when I see them, I see their will straightened out. It's something I like seeing. But one thing you talk about is how China is very patient, right? How
Yeah.
China is waits a very long time to straighten things out.
Yep.
I want to ask, why do you think there's going to be a war this year or next year? Why
Because
why wouldn't they
can't
wait
and
more?
yeah, they can't wait any longer because see, their population has become used to this go-go growth, right? And that
Mhm.
growth is over, and they have an over indebtedness that is catastrophic. I mean, it really is. Okay, and this is going to lead to a financial crash in China, and any kind of financial crash in a country that is run by a totalitarian system inevitably leads to huge social chaos where you have all kinds of protests, all kinds of demands for justice, power sharing. It's a political problem, okay? And historically, you go through every country that has been experiencing economic hardship. And if the leaders have the opportunity, they always go for a military solution. That is, they go out and attack somebody or get in a war.
Mhm.
Because a war is a great way to drown any complaints about the economy. Okay, so you're China. You're the Chinese Communist Party, and you see that you're about to suffer a catastrophic economic collapse, right? And so you say to yourself, you know, I'm going to go to war with Taiwan. I'm going to drum up nationalism first and, you know, make it clear that America is the enemy. And then I'm going to go to a war with the United States over Taiwan. And I'm going to blame it all on the Americans. And of course, who's going to contradict me? I control the media, right? So I blame it all on the United States. And the economic crash happens in China, but it's happening in the middle of this war. And so people are like, oh my God, we have this economic crash. We lost all our savings, or there's no food or whatever. But we have to get behind the government because we're in a war with the Americans, and we have to win. You see how it happens? See,
Yeah.
a war will mask the problems of an economic crash, and people will tend to blame the war for their economic problems and economic perils of the country. They won't blame the government. You see? In fact, they will support the government all the more because they think that they're supporting the war effort. You see? That's what's going on.
Yeah.
And of course, were this economic crash not approaching for China, they would play the long game with Taiwan, of course. But see, this economic problem that they're having is making them have to fix things with a military solution, okay? And that's what's going on. Does this rationale, does this make sense to you, or doesn't? And if it doesn't, what's the problems that you see?
It gets through the head. It's just, I don't know why they went. They think it's the only solution. Why did they go by the? They grow up so fast. Did they knew it was gonna happen like this years ago?
No. They didn't know that it was gonna blow out. The economy was gonna blow out. Nobody does. I mean, if you know that the economy is gonna blow out like this, you take steps to avoid it. But you know, here we are, and so they're going to have to face it, and so that's the problem. See, and a war solves so many problems. It armors you against any kind of domestic problem, because also what happens is that with the justification of a war, you can go out and what you call it, repress as many people as you want. Because it's a war, you know, I can't allow fifth columnists, you know, traitors in our midst. We got to ship them to the gulags or wherever the fuck, you see? So it makes complete sense to start up a war, a big war, and use it as the perfect cover. And that way you have the whole economy blows up, but you're in the middle of the war. And when the war is over, then you can rebuild your economy. It's the perfect solution. And, you know, the Chinese communists, they're not dumb. I think that this is the plan. This is where they're headed. And there's, I don't realistically see, I don't see any other option for them. See, because if the economy blows up and it's peacetime, then the people are going to blame the Communist Party. And there are going to be demonstrations, riots, every city, a whole fucking shit show. And the Communist Party does not want that because they know that their hold on power is tenuous. It's not as strong as everybody thinks it is, because China in many ways is a much more politically dynamic country than the Western democracies, because the people in China have a very cynical view of their leaders. Well, that's becoming more the case in the West too. But, you know, in the West, a lot of people still have the illusion that the people who are in positions of power are representatives of the people, right? In China, they have no such illusions. They know that the Communist Party is a dictatorship. And they've been willing to put up with the dictatorship so long as they were prosperous. But if their prosperity is taken away by some financial crisis, even if the Chinese Communist Party was not really responsible for it, even if it was just a natural outgrowth of what was going on over the last 30 years, they're still going to get blamed for it. See? So they want to avoid blame because it's human nature, you know? Nobody wants to take blame. Nobody says, oh, yes, I'm the one who did it. Nobody says that, you know? So, yeah, that's what's going to happen.
Of course. All right.
Anything else on your mind?
No, nothing else. Thank you.
No, my pleasure, man. Thanks for being on. I appreciate it.
Hey, Coach, how you doing? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. What's on your mind, man?
So I didn't get to catch too much of the stream. I did see some of it. I wanted to jump on what the other gentleman was talking about. I guess he was talking about being an engineer and then you had mentioned that obviously the fabric of our very society is really just coming apart. I'm asking you because you have a specific skill set. You were in the entertainment industry, obviously, right? I am an actor, and as you can guess, I am in the extreme minority in entertainment for sure. And I'm having a bit of an issue because to be honest with you, I've committed about 15 years of my life to pursuing this, and it has become almost.
Are you making a living at it?
No, I'm not.
Then move on.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that right now. Okay, you got to move on because it's not going to happen. Okay.
Yeah.
I hate to be the one to tell you. I don't want to sound like an asshole, but
You're
that's
not
the
an
truth.
asshole. You're not an asshole.
Like a lot of guys, they're always like, "Oh, it's just around the corner," and they spend the whole fucking lives like that.
Yeah. No.
And being an actor, especially, it's so demoralizing. Because see, as a writer, you submit your work,
Mhm.
and people can shit on the work, on the script that you wrote, or the story you wrote, or whatever. But when they reject you because you're going there and you're giving a performance, in the casting room or whatever, right? It feels like they're rejecting you. They're not. They're not rejecting you, and you're just not right for the role for whatever reason.
Yeah.
But if you spend that much time and you're not making a living at it, it's just not going to happen. It's simple as that. And to pretend otherwise, you're going to wind up having thrown away your entire life. How old are you, by the way?
I'm in my mid-30s, man. 36.
Okay. It's time to move on.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you're right.
I'm not saying this to shit on you. I'm not saying this to hurt your feelings or make you feel bad.
I hear you.
I'm telling you because that's the truth.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we don't want to see the truth, and we know the truth. And you yourself, when I tell you this, do you think that I'm lying?
No, I don't think you're lying, and I've had these thoughts myself the past couple of weeks. It's just, I think my brain is sort of like there's some cognitive dissonance, I guess, because there's a part of me, I had so much of an ego investment in it, but I'm like I can't go on something that I wanted to do way back when if it isn't work. You know what I mean? I can't keep going in this direction because it's just, you're right. You're gonna spend. I've seen guys audition in their 50s, 60s. So I produce things, right? And I see them walk in and they're 60 and they're like shells of men. They're like still waiting tables and doing catering. And it's like, holy fuck, it freaked me the fuck out.
Do you want to be that guy?
No, not at all. I have no intention of, I don't want to be that guy.
Look, what happens in Hollywood, in the entertainment business generally, the guys who make it, they make it in the first couple of years.
Yeah.
Okay. At least they're earning a living. Like some actors, I've noticed, they have this journeyman career for a while, and then they explode. Okay. And it's because they grow into their looks, but they already had a career before. Like George Clooney, for instance.
Yeah.
George Clooney was a working actor. He was doing TV shows and all the rest of it. He was like, he was earning a living, paying the bills as an actor. And it was for a good long while. It was like 7-8 years. And he thought to himself, well, I'm just going to be a journeyman actor. And then he had the show in ER in 94, and that's when his career exploded, right? But from the get-go, he was earning a living.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's the key issue. See, the guys who are going to make it, they start earning a living, perhaps not a very good living, but they don't have to have like a separate job to pay the bills.
Yeah.
From the get-go. The other guy, Bryan Cranston, same thing. He was a working actor, not a big name, not at all. I mean, nobody even knew him. He was like this anonymous white guy.
Yeah.
And then he did Malcolm in the Middle, and then he did Breaking Bad. And that's when his career exploded and he became a superstar, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was really because the difference between his role in Malcolm in the Middle and Breaking Bad was just like, holy shit, what the fuck? And everybody sort of like woke up to him and realized what a great actor he was.
Yeah.
He'd always been a very good actor, but he'd always been cast as the dad guy, like in Malcolm in the Middle. And he'd been doing these roles for a good long while, but he's always been earning a living. And so you talk to directors, you talk to writers, you talk to actors, and the first question is, are you earning a living at it? Okay, like a lot of directors, they never get to do a movie, but they're doing lots of TV commercials and industrial commercials, and they're earning a living as that. You know, they don't particularly care for it, but they are directing. They're earning a living at it. And there are other actors who, same thing. A lot of them do industrials, they do commercials, you know, and they have they get money. They're earning a living. They don't particularly care for the work that they're doing. I mean, like a commercial is not particularly fulfilling, right?
Yeah.
But they're getting the cash, you know, and they're moving on, right? Same with writers, you know, like when I started out. Look, my experience. When I got to Hollywood, I didn't know anybody. I knew like 3 people, okay, 3 names in the industry. And off of those 3 names, within 2 weeks, I got an option deal for my first script. And I was kind of like treading water for a while. You know, I had to get like a temp job, right? For a while, I was working at a temp job. I was working at Disney Corporation, I remember, filing these television contracts, international TV contracts. I'd get these contracts for each episode of each of these TV shows for each territory, right? And I'd file them in this enormous room. It was this white room with all these white filing cabinets.
Yeah.
And in each filing cabinet was for a particular country. And I'd go into the shelves for the particular show and then stick that contract in with all the others. It was like thousands. It was enormous, right? Anyway, I had that was my temp job, but I didn't have that temp job very long, you know. And I remember I graduated in by July 4th or so, I was in LA. And you know, the summer there's not much happening, but I managed to get this option deal that paid me like $5,000. And then after that, I was like running low on cash, and I got like this gig, this temp job gig, right? And it was temp office work. And then after that, I got another option for some other script that I'd had circulating. And then I got my first like gig, real gig. I was offered to do a rewrite on Dungeons and Dragons. They'd never used any of the material, but right there, like I got a nice little payout. And then in September, and I've been writing a novel in September of '96. What was that? 15 months after I arrived, I scored a big publishing deal. It was a 7-figure deal, and I was on my way. And that's what happens with most guys who earn a living in the entertainment business. You know, they're sort of like getting a few gigs here and there, and it's going good, and then they have a break after 2 years, a year, 2 years, something like that.
Yeah.
And if that hasn't happened, it ain't gonna happen. It's just not gonna happen. And what happens also, I've noticed, is that, see, I noticed in writers, a lot of times writers who are very decent writers but perennially unsuccessful, they get like this odor of failure around them. There's no other way to put it. It's really ugly. And I mean, it's really ugly the way I'm saying it, but it's true. They get this vibe of their failures, that they can't land it. And they come out, you know, they come out of the gate, you meet them, and they're like bright and cheerful and like upbeat, right? But you're like, this guy, there's something there, okay? It's like subliminal. It's something, I can't explain it, but it's there, man, and
No, I
everybody
hear you.
sees it, you
I
know.
hear you.
And I mean, you've probably met actors who are like that, who are just upbeat, they're great, everything, but they're like, this guy's a loser, and it sounds awful because you're belittling somebody, even though they are putting out their best effort and trying to make the best impression, and they're sharply dressed and everything, but you get the vibe, the unconscious vibe, that they're not there. That they're not making it, that they're desperate, that they're panicking. And the thing is that happens, I know it in writing, is that when you get that vibe as a producer, because I've been in the shoes of a producer hiring people, when you get a writer with that vibe, you don't want to hire them.
Yeah.
Because you think, oh man, this guy's a fucking loser. Even though he might be actually really good, but because that's the way human nature is, okay? And so I'm explaining all of this because really not so much for you because you probably know it, but a lot of people, so that they understand the situation insofar as the entertainment business is concerned, entertainment, publishing, all these businesses, it's it's hard to explain. But bottom line, if you're not earning a basic living after a year or two, it's likely not going to happen. And yeah, I'm sorry, Laris. I don't, like I say, I'm not trying to belittle you or shit on you or anything like that.
No, man. This is why I jumped on. I've lived in Fantasyland for a long time, and finding this community, Red Pill and all you guys are so valuable to me because it's just I was lied to by everybody, my parents, like that. The thing you did about I don't know. It was like one video. I don't remember the thing, but he was like, "Fuck you!" Like you didn't fucking show us anything. I don't know. You were just freaking out, and it made sense because it was just I just feel like so much of my life I was just lied to, and nobody just told me the truth, and all I wanted was the truth because I don't want to live in Fantasyland, man. I want to do well in life, and I'm waking up from this now and trying to right the ship.
What happens is that people don't want to hurt your feelings.
Yeah.
Which is the worst thing in the world because it feeds you into something that's unreal, Yeah, it's and look, and the thing is, see, consider yourself lucky, Laris. Okay, really. Yeah. See, you're young enough that you can start over. Imagine if you were 50. Absolutely. You're what? You're 36, 37?
36, yeah, 36.
You can start over. Believe me, you can start over. Okay.
Cool.
Oh yeah, no.
I was like, oh, my life is over, man.
No. I mean, look, don't waste your time getting accreditation, like going to school and taking out debt to get some stupid degree. That's a waste of fucking time. And you're postponing, your life. Okay. No, you have to just dive into something else, and you have to hustle and figure out some business that you can do or anything. Okay.
Yeah.
But understand, don't go to school to get accreditation because it's doing two things. You're getting into debt for no reason. You're postponing your life again because you have to think that this period where you tried to be an actor, you were just postponing your life.
Yeah.
Okay. And so you have to go in a different direction. Okay. Don't go to school because there's nothing there that you're going to learn that's going to be of any value. What the fuck? Are you going to be a doctor at this age?
No.
8 years of being a doctor school and shit like that. Fuck that. Do something that you can score money now quickly. Okay. And get your shit in order. But I'll tell you right now, you're 36. I'm 53. You're a fucking baby, man. I mean, it's a miracle that you're not like wearing diapers still, as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, because I remember when I was 36 and now I'm 53. I'm like, Jesus, man, I was a fucking idiot. And because you learn more.
Yeah.
And you have so many opportunities. Okay. Yeah. So don't think that you don't have opportunities. You just haven't looked for them. Okay. And like I said, you have no idea how fucking lucky you are because now you're realizing this.
Yeah.
Think of those guys who are in their 50s and 60s who still haven't. Think of that.
Yeah.
Think of that. Think how lucky you got it compared to those poor bastards. Okay?
Yeah. Thanks, man.
Yeah, man.
I do have one small question.
Sure.
Or do you have to go?
No.
So I listened to I don't know how you guys feel. I try to listen to everybody, as many opinions as I can, but listen to Aaron Clare, and he talked about like do shit that you actually have the skills to do. You know what I mean? Like don't try to fit yourself, don't try to fit a round peg in a square hole or whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking back in terms of the times that I was successful. I am a very, very good producer. I've sold a show to a network. Like I've done that stuff, but I stopped because I'm like, oh, I'm not an actor. But every time I do the producing thing, and I'm not bullshitting you. I'm good at it.
Well, then do that.
And yeah, like that thing that makes me like I don't know. I geek out about that shit. People are like, oh, producing so hard. I'm like, I think it's the best, man. It's awesome.
Well, and it could be that all this time that you spent as an actor with all this knowledge that you have of the industry will serve you very, very well as a producer. So do that.
Yeah.
I mean, look, when was the last time you had a paying gig as an actor? A paying gig?
Fucking Christ. I did a voiceover during pandemic and it paid me like $400 or some bullshit. It wasn't
okay. And before that?
I was on a TV show. I was on FBI. That was a year before that, and that paid, I don't know, whatever the day rate is, 1,400, and then I got a couple checks after that.
Yeah, so you're talking over the last 2 years, 2019 and 2020, you earned roughly $2,500.
Pretty much, yeah, maybe 3,000 if I pepper in a couple things here. But.
Okay, so about $50 per month.
yeah, I made $50 a month as an actor.
And how much did you spend? You don't want to. I don't want to even ask. I mean,
Countless.
headshots alone would ate that up.
My headshots alone were $1,400.
Yeah.
I just signed up for like this Actors Fast Track thing. Speaking of that, you were talking about like, oh, you can smell the desperation. There's this thing called Actors Fast Track where you pay $1,000 and you meet a bunch of casting directors, and it's nothing but people that you can smell the desperation off of them. So that's also the thing. It's like I'm looking at these people and I'm like, I'm in this room right now. so if I'm judging these, like, wait a second, I'm in the room. So
I'm one of these guys.
Yeah, I'm one of these guys. You know, because it's just
hilarious, man. You're ahead of the game.
Yeah,
You're ahead of the fucking game because you're realizing this.
Yeah.
Those other guys, they don't. Okay. And so you're realizing it so you can make the change.
Yeah.
And if you told me that you sold a TV show to a network.
Well,
it was a background on that.
It was a micro series to a streaming network. So there was this streaming network called what's the name of it? The Stage Network, which is like Netflix for theater.
Okay.
So basically what it was I had a buddy of mine and we used to be personal trainers together. He's a writer. He was optioning a show for them. And he's like, hey, bro, like you like Shakespeare. You're really good at Shakespeare. Can you write something? And I was like, yeah, whatever. I pulled something out of my ass. Basically, I wrote 5 episodes in meter in Jacobean speech. Okay. So I wrote it and then gave it to the network and they loved it and they produced it. But the network went belly up and I never saw anything of it. And then like the guy showed me, he sent me the clips finally, the buddy of mine, and I saw it. But it was interesting. It was like there was just something that I did because somebody just asked me to do it. And that's what I'm saying. It's like immediately I started having success with that stuff.
Well, then do more of that.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, like, look, see, I understand that there's always a sunk cost fallacy, and that's what's happened to you. You've spent so much time as an actor that you figure that, lucky number 7 is going to come through any day now on the roulette table, and you keep on betting, right?
Yeah.
Well, okay, walking completely away from the entertainment business, yeah, you have so much skills and knowledge about it that's kind of foolish. Seriously repositioning yourself. And mentally thinking to yourself, I'm not an actor, I'm a producer. See how it goes. It could be that that's your future, man. And that's the closest thing you've got right now, putting shows together and thinking specifically not about I'm an actor, I want to get some role, but rather I'm a producer. How do I put packages together that pay me money?
Yeah.
Think of it in those terms. Okay.
Yeah, I will, man. Thanks a lot.
My pleasure, man. You take it easy.
You be well. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye. Whoa, where did Wheat Waffles go? Well, I had Wheat Waffles on, but he split. Wheat Waffles, are you going to come back, or was that not Wheat Waffles? Because that's what it said in the thing. Wait. No, that's a shame. I would have enjoyed talking to Wheat Waffles if that indeed was Wheat Waffles, or not some guy who is like pretending to be Wheat Waffles. Wait. Let me hang on a second because I'm going to be winding down the stream now. I've been going on for close to 3 hours, and I actually have to be home by 9 o'clock because I got something to do. So anyway, I just want to wind up this webinar by telling you all that, well, this is an idea. And I know that I've been kind of like doom and gloom and black pilled and all that shit. And I know it's not, it doesn't make anybody happy. It certainly doesn't make me happy. And I've been talking to a lot of my friends who are either far away or nearby, but talking to them and going over everything that's going on and trying to figure out, quite frankly, if I'm losing my head or if shit seems as bad as it does to me. And, well, all of the people I've talked to seem to agree that shit seems to be pretty bad. Okay. And so that's why I'm kind of like doom and gloom, and it's kind of like, you know, unhappiness time right now. Okay. And it's not something that I'm, how could I put it? Sometimes reality is fucking ugly and you have to face it. And it's depressing, but you have to just face it and you have to figure out how you're going to handle it, how you're going to deal with it. And the reality that we're facing now is really fucking ugly. For those of you in Australia, for instance, I don't know if there are any in Australia right now, or perhaps listening to this later when I post the recording, but you know, Australia is going down the fucking tubes. Australia is a fucking police state. Don't give me shit that it isn't. It is. It's a fucking police state. Everybody's just losing their fucking minds. They have concentration camps. Right now, these are for people who are quarantined, but pretty soon it's going to be for people who are spreading misinformation, quote unquote. Pretty soon it's going to be for enemies of the state. And pretty soon they're going to figure out, you know, we got them there. You know, why don't we just execute the fuckers, you know, for their own good, you know? I mean, they're passing misinformation and they don't want to get the vax, and we're all about helping people. And if they don't want to be helped, well, why don't we just get rid of them? I mean, that's the kind of mentality these fuckers are using. And the fact is that Australians are not doing fucking shit about it. And that's the tragedy. You're realizing that most people are fucking sheep. Most people in democracies, they don't do fucking shit and they're unwilling to step up and defend their freedoms. And a lot of them talk a big game, but bottom line, they're not doing fuck all. And well, you got to face the reality. It's an ugly reality, but this is the reality that we have. And you have to be prepared for it. I've made up my mind that the 1st of March of next year, I have to have everything in my life organized. Organized, and I'll live my life for the next 10 to 20 years. Because I think that by the 1st of March, that's when the shit is going to start to get really heavy. And after that, I don't see any possibility of getting out of it. And the information that I've been hearing as of late just leads me to conclude that even more, that we're just going down the tubes. And so, yeah, and it sucks, but that's life. Face it and just deal with it. Okay? Okay. Sorry for the black pill today, but I don't know. Next week, I'll do something different. And like I said, around September 21st or so, or whenever, roughly September 21st, I'm going to do an AMA. And I'll post it beforehand so you can formulate questions. And it'll be like 2 hours of only AMA. And I'll try to keep it brief so as to cover as many people as possible and get to as many people as possible. Okay? Okay. This is CRP signing off. You guys take it easy.